Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christina Carlin-Kraft. Christina Rose Carlin-Kraft was born on November 11, 1983, in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Kraft and Dawn Carlin. From a young age, she enjoyed being in front of the camera, whether it was being photographed or videotaped. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City. Although she had a stable job, her true aspiration was to become a model. Christina's determination eventually paid off, and she achieved some success in the modeling industry. In her promotional materials, she expressed her love for posing in elegant lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend Christina met while working on a 3-day photo shoot for Maxim magazine, Christina was a charming and beautiful person with a great sense of humor. With her dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the qualities of a fashion model. Christina's ultimate goal was to appear on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while still working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, Christina met Alex Caiatelli, and they soon began dating. Alex supports Christina's ambitions and never hindered her career. They got engaged after a long relationship. During this time, Christina became Cybergirl of the Month in May 2009, earning an invitation to the Playboy Mansion, where she attended exclusive events and experienced luxury. At the height of her career, Christina's ambitions soared, particularly after meeting Hugh Hefner. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, she failed to secure a modeling contract with Playboy magazine, a highly competitive opportunity that only one girl among thousands of applicants can attain. Christina faced significant obstacles in becoming a top model at that time. One major issue was her age. At 26, she was considered too old for certain magazines that typically feature younger models. Despite this, she continued to work hard, landing jobs with prominent companies like Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, and Vanity Fair. Determined to advance her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, her decision to pose for Playboy proved to be a setback. Many brands were hesitant to work with her after the explicit photo shoot, and her career began to decline. Eventually, it came to a complete halt. It was a challenging time for Christina, but she was grateful to have Alex's support to help her through it. Christina was a woman known for both her physical beauty and her controversial behavior. In 2016, she caused a disturbance at the Smith, a New York restaurant. Following the incident, the New York Post published several articles about what had happened. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin-Kraft, 34, was dining at the Smith with a male friend on March 6 when an argument broke out over the bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager, Sergei Anikin, intervened. Christina, who was reportedly intoxicated, claimed the manager had pushed her, but a video of the incident showed that was not true. During the altercation, Christina allegedly hit a police officer on the neck, causing redness and significant pain. She was subsequently charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, after the district attorney offered her a deal, the charges were dropped on the condition that she stayed out of trouble for 6 months. Christina's lawyer explained that she accepted a reasonable deal offered by the district attorney. Christina had always been fond of Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, where she felt a strong sense of safety. Considering this, Alex purchased an apartment for her in Ardmore, and they of them relocated to Pennsylvania in 2018. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore did not live up to her expectations of being a safe haven. In fact, on August 18, 2018, she reported a robbery to the police. Christina spent the evening at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night are hazy. The next morning, she woke up with no recollection of how she got home or if anyone was with her. She suspected that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. Feeling scared, she confided in others about her concerns. Her partner, Alex, was away on a business trip at the time, which added to her anxiety. The police investigation into the incident uncovered CCTV footage that showed a car arriving at Christina's apartment building around 3 a.m. The footage revealed that Christina was unconscious in the back seat. The driver, who was later identified as the perpetrator, took Christina's keys from her purse and entered her apartment. Once inside, the thief stole over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer handbags, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The perpetrator spent about an hour and a half in Christina's apartment before returning to the car. He then helped Christina out of the vehicle and into her apartment building, leaving her in the hallway. The thief put the keys back in Christina's purse and drove away, leaving her disoriented and frightened. The police were able to identify the perpetrator of the robbery with the help of a credit card statement. The culprit was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. At the time of the robbery, Melton was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with a Virginia license plate. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17, a sighting confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. As the police searched for Melton and worked to recover Christina's stolen belongings, a far more serious crime occurred. On August 22, 2018, Alex Cayatelli called the police to ask them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin-Kraft, as he was unable to contact her. When he arrived home, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. A review of the security system revealed that someone had opened the front door and balcony door overnight. The police were forced to break down the front door to gain entry. Upon entering the apartment, they immediately discovered a crime scene, with a body on the bed covered in a blanket and blood visible. Christina Carlin-Kraft's brutally beaten body was discovered under a blanket. She had suffered severe injuries, including a broken nose and strangulation marks on her neck. When Christina's identity was confirmed, the news of her death was devastating to Alex. As the police investigated further, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Alex might be involved in her murder. After all, the closest people to the victim are often the prime suspects. Christina and Alex had a long history together, and anything could have happened between them. The fact that Alex had called the police to express his concern about Christina, only to have her body discovered shortly after, raised suspicions. It was possible that Alex had staged his concern to divert attention from himself. The detectives asked him to accompany them to the police station for questioning, and Alex agreed without hesitation. Alex told investigators he had to return to New York for urgent work on August 21st. On August 22nd, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to say goodnight, but she didn't answer. Since Christina was always awake at that hour, Alex grew concerned. He called her several more times, but got no response. He then checked the security system and found suspicious activity at the apartment that night. Alex decided to put his business on hold and return to Ardmore immediately. The police believed Alex's story and ruled him out as a suspect, as it was impossible for him to be in two places at once. His alibi checked out, and the police cleared him of any involvement in Christina's death. The main suspect in Christina's murder was initially Andre Melton, who had previously stolen valuables from her apartment. It's possible that he returned to the apartment to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Alternatively, he may have discovered that she had reported him to the police and sought revenge. On August 22nd, the day Christina's body was discovered, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his residence, they found some of Christina's belongings, but Melton was nowhere to be found. However, surveillance footage from the night of the crime revealed that Christina had returned to her apartment with an unknown man at 3:08 a.m., but it wasn't Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage showed that the unknown man did not leave the apartment. To investigate further, police reviewed CCTV footage from the streets of Ardmore and discovered that Christina had visited a bar in Philadelphia before returning to her apartment. At the bar, investigators found footage of Christina meeting a man who later hugged her, the same man she had returned to her apartment with. Christina and a new acquaintance hailed a taxi after leaving the bar. Detectives tracked her movements to rebuild the timeline of events leading up to her death. They eliminated Melton as a suspect since he wasn't with her that day. They still had to determine if her death was connected to the earlier robbery or just a coincidence. On August 25th, the police got a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who drove Christina and her companion that night. He reported that Christina and her friend had approached him, and they didn't use the taxi app. After agreeing on a fare, they got into the taxi. According to Sanford, the couple seemed affectionate and friendly, so they didn't raise any suspicions. Sanford also remembered that when they arrived at their destination, Christina took the initiative to settle the fare. However, she didn't have any cash on her. She offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford refused. Then, Christina's friend offered him $100 if he would wait 10 to 15 minutes near the house while they went to the apartment. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her friend returned. Christina and the man entered their apartment around 3 a.m. At 4 a.m., Christina made a brief call to her cousin, but didn't speak a word. Her cousin, however, heard a man in the background instructing Christina not to call the police. The call ended abruptly, leaving the cousin unclear about what was happening. The police later determined the timeline of the crime using the apartment's door sensors, which recorded the exact times the doors were opened. The data showed that the first door opening occurred at 3:08 a.m. and the next at 5:10 a.m. Since the apartment was on the second floor, the investigators suspected that the perpetrator had left through the sliding glass door on the balcony, which was also detected by the security system around the same time. This explained why the surveillance cameras did not capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left the apartment. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment. Based on this information, the police theorized that the perpetrator escaped by jumping off the balcony. The investigation's next step was to seek the public's help through the media. After releasing the surveillance camera images, the authorities asked anyone with information to come forward. The photos showed two individuals, Andre Melton and the second person who was at Christina's apartment on the night of her death. Surprisingly, Andre Melton called the police by himself, admitting to stealing from Christina but denying involvement in her murder. On August 26th, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects in the recent crime. The caller revealed that he had shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. According to the caller, the suspect had previously assaulted a woman in Love Park and molesting her. The suspect became aggressive, shouting and causing a disturbance, and was eventually hospitalized for 2 hours at a cost of $70. However, he was not identified. The caller provided more chilling information. The suspect had bragged about strangling a woman and felt proud and satisfied by the act. This new information convinced investigators that the suspect was likely responsible for the murder of Christina Carlin-Kraft. The police received another call from a Philadelphia relative of the suspect, who identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, a convicted felon with a history of robbery. Harris had been released from prison on July 15, just 5 weeks before Christina's murder. After studying the suspect's entire biography, it became clear that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no prior connection and had never met. As a result, the police ruled out any link between their crimes. Additionally, the police gained access to Harris's phone messages. On August 22, he texted a friend that he had met an attractive woman and was going to her apartment. On August 28, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris. It was essential to apprehend him as soon as possible, as no one knew what he might do next. However, Harris had left no trail. When investigators contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, she revealed that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. As it turned out, Harris was already on the bus when the conversation took place. The Ardmore police were unable to act, and the officers wouldn't be able to catch up with him. The Pittsburgh police were their last hope. Timing was crucial, and the police investigating Christina's death contacted the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They informed the task force of the bus's expected arrival time in Pittsburgh and shared a photo of Harris, helping them plan a strategic ambush. The officers blocked off all potential escape routes and were prepared to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. As the bus approached, one of the employees spotted Harris and allowed him to disembark calmly, reducing the likelihood of panic or chaotic behavior. About 10 minutes later, a police officer intercepted Harris. Harris gave a false name when asked to identify himself. He was arrested and taken to the police station, where detectives from Philadelphia interrogated him about his involvement in Christina's case. Harris claimed that he met Christina at a bar or nightclub, where she was alone and he approached her. He admitted to being under the influence of both illegal substances and alcohol at the time. After chatting and having a drink, Christina invited him to her place. Once they arrived, Harris asked the taxi driver to wait, intending to return shortly. However, he ended up staying with Christina, and they drank multiple bottles of wine together. He claimed that they then engaged in an intimate relationship with mutual consent and used a prohibited substance. Afterward, Harris demanded that Christina pay him $1,200, which she refused. The situation escalated into a physical altercation when Christina allegedly hit Harris with a wine bottle. In response, Harris claimed he hit her in the face, causing her to fall to the floor. When Christina attempted to call for emergency assistance, Harris strangled her with sweatpants until she lost consciousness. Despite his account, several inconsistencies were found in his story. During the toxicology examination, experts found no prohibited substances in Christina's body, only alcohol. This contradicted the suspect's initial claim that he had only hit her once. When confronted with the results, Harris admitted to lying. Harris initially tried to convince detectives of his innocence, claiming Christina was fine when he left her apartment. However, during a subsequent interrogation, he fully confessed to his guilt. He explained that he had panicked after severely beating her, leaving her while she was still breathing, and covering her with a blanket to avoid the sight. Ultimately, Jonathan Harris confessed to taking Christina's life and attempting to escape detection by jumping off the balcony. Despite his earlier confession, Harris pleaded not guilty at the trial. Nevertheless, the investigators had gathered substantial evidence, making it impossible for Harris and his lawyer to win the case. The court was expected to sentence Jonathan Harris to 22 to 40 years in prison for the crime of third-degree life deprivation. However, the large amount of evidence presented by the prosecutors convinced the court that the crime was intentional, making life imprisonment a possibility. During the trial, a key witness testified against Harris. This witness had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic and had previously reported Harris to the police. Harris had confessed to the crime while in the clinic, telling the witness that he enjoyed the feeling of squeezing someone and watching them take their last breath. In the end, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to 30 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge handed down an additional 22 to 45-year sentence to Harris. The lengthy sentence was intended to send a message to future authorities who might consider granting him early release or pardon. In a separate case, Andre Melton was arrested in December 2018 and charged with burglarizing Carlin-Kraft's apartment. He was sentenced in March 2020 to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, totaling 7 years under court supervision. Before receiving his sentence, Melton apologized to Carlin-Kraft's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Peets. Nicole Peets was born on February 26, 1973, in King County, Washington. She was the only child of her parents, whose marriage broke up when the girl was still in school. In high school, Nicole grew up to be an active and sociable child, played sports, and was considered a real charmer. She always had a lot of friends, loved trips out of town to the countryside, and her favorite place of rest was Lake Sammamish, located east of Seattle, where she spent every summer vacation. After graduating from high school, the girl went to Western Washington College, where she studied public relations. In parallel, Nicole continued to actively participate in sports, was in excellent physical shape, and decided to turn her hobby into a source of profit. She got a job as a trainer at a local sports club, where she quickly gained the respect of her colleagues and also gained regular clients who willingly attended group classes where Nicole was an instructor. In parallel, Peets decided to get a higher education in the field of management and got a job in a large mobile communications company. Outwardly, she was always friendly, sociable, and ready to help at any moment, but almost no one even guessed how much pain and misery was hidden behind a screen of apparent well-being. As a teenager, Nicole experienced a serious crisis when her parents divorced. For her fragile yet unformed psyche, it was a great shock, and her rebellious character and bad company led her to hide from her problems by turning to alcohol. This led to a serious addiction that lasted several years and thoroughly undermined Nicole's physical and mental health. At that time, Nicole's mother, Gail, worked as a stewardess and was almost constantly absent from home because of her busy work schedule, so she did not notice in time that something was wrong with her only daughter. The girl lived with an elderly grandmother who also did not immediately realize that her granddaughter was regularly consuming alcohol. When the truth was revealed, the alcohol addiction had already done irreparable damage. To cope with the problem, Nicole was helped by her mother, Gail, with whom she had always been very close. Despite everything, Gail not only sent her daughter to therapy, but also attended AA meetings with her, helping her to open up and overcome her cravings for alcohol. By then, Gail had remarried, and her new boyfriend, Rod, was sympathetic and supported her stepdaughter in every way possible, loving her like his own daughter and believing that she could overcome her addiction. Nicole approached therapy responsibly, did not miss a single meeting, and quickly enough was able to overcome her addiction. However, as mentioned, alcohol took a toll on Nicole's health, and she developed serious problems with her pancreas, requiring surgery. The worst thing was that alcohol abuse at such a young age violated her reproductive functions, so that Peets could not have children. In the mid-90s, when Nicole overcame her addiction and returned to a sober life, she met her future spouse, whose name was David. At that time, she had just got a job at a sports club, and David was a regular visitor, a tall, handsome young man who carefully watched himself and did not miss any training. Nicole immediately liked him, and he also paid attention to the attractive coach and began to show interest in her. Although David was 4 years younger than Nicole, the age difference did not embarrass them. Soon, a romantic relationship began between them, which lasted almost 8 years. And only in 2002 did the couple get married. They arranged a beautiful but modest wedding ceremony in Hawaii, to which only their closest people were invited. After the wedding, the newlyweds settled in the quiet town of Linwood in Washington state, where they bought their own house and gradually established themselves. Nicole was a very sociable and friendly young woman. She quickly made friends and also developed good relationships with all the neighbors. She simply adored animals and had several dogs since she could not have children. she gave all her unspent maternal love to her pets. According to the neighbors' memories, David and Nicole looked like the perfect married couple. They were practically inseparable, often walking their dogs together and just radiating happiness. Nicole loved to cook, and she was very good at it. She pampered her spouse with delicious home-cooked food and also liked to surprise the guests who came to their house with her culinary skills. In 2006, just a few days before Nicole's 33rd birthday, she mysteriously disappeared. That day, for the first time, she failed to attend the meeting of the AA Society, where she was the leader and inspiration for the group. Since this had never happened before, the other members assumed she had relapsed after nearly 9 years of sobriety. She also did not show up for work that day, which concerned her co-workers. In the evening, Gail, who couldn't reach her daughter all day, which was highly unusual, raised the alarm. She called David to find out what had happened, but her son-in-law replied that he too was unable to contact his spouse. According to her husband, he and Nicole had a minor disagreement the previous day. When he tried to call her the next day and she did not answer, he assumed Nicole was still upset with him. For this reason, David did not start searching for her immediately, but waited until the evening to seek his wife's forgiveness. However, when Nicole did not return home in the evening and her phone remained unanswered, the family decided to go to the police. At the police station, their request was not immediately accepted, as the missing person was an adult and it had not yet been a full day since her disappearance. The police stated there was no cause for concern, and the search was not initiated until the evening of the second day. Because Nicole never showed up and her phone was unavailable, the police decided to start the search from the place where Nicole was last seen, namely from her and David's house. However, no clues or anything unusual could be found there that would indicate that Nicole had been kidnapped or something had been done to her in that very room. In addition, Nicole was missing along with her personal automobile, which suggested that she had simply left and decided not to return. From here arose the first theory, according to which the young woman, after a family dispute with her husband, simply decided to leave him or teach him a lesson, making him worry. The second theory was voiced by Nicole's friends from a support group for people with alcohol addiction. In their opinion, Nicole could have relapsed after years of abstinence and sobriety. In favor of this hypothesis was the fact that recently she had been taking strong painkillers, which she was prescribed because of a back injury, and her pain often exceeded the prescribed dosage. At some point, she may have switched from medication to alcohol. The third theory was the most dire of all possible outcomes. Nicole did not return and did not provide any updates about herself because she was no longer alive. However, the family members of the missing person refused to accept this until the end and held on to hope for the best. Her mother and stepfather did not wait for the police and began the search themselves. They appealed to all concerned individuals through social media, requesting help in the search and asking them to share any relevant information about the location of their daughter. They also took the first flight to Linwood, where they began searching for their daughter on their own, putting up flyers with her photos and asking people who knew her personally. The police searched not only for Nicole but also for her car while trying to establish which route it had traveled on that fateful day. But the longer the search lasted, the faster the hope of finding Nicole alive faded. The worst assumptions came true. A few days later, in one of the local park areas, a man going for a morning jog came across the body of a young woman. That day, he decided to take a shortcut through an unpopular and neglected area rather than his usual route. There he noticed something strange in the shrubbery, and upon closer inspection, he realized it was a badly mutilated, naked female body. Information about the terrible discovery was immediately reported to the police. The criminalists who arrived at the scene suggested that the crime may have involved violence. The young woman's body had no clothes, and it was clearly a murder. Based on the numerous bruises, abrasions, and injuries, the victim had been severely beaten prior to her death. The cause of death was asphyxiation. Nicole was strangled with her bare hands. It was a truly gruesome scene. The victim's car was still not found, and investigators assumed that the main motive of the crime was theft, but the attacker decided to eliminate a witness. Since it was a young woman, she may also have been abused. The police immediately assumed that the body found belonged to Nicole Peets, who had disappeared a few days ago and was being searched for all over the city, but she had yet to be identified by her family. When Gail saw her daughter's body in the morgue, she lost her senses, and the mother needed medical help. Her husband Rod was also overcome with grief. However, the reaction of the widowed spouse, David, seemed a little strange. He did not look depressed at all, and his emotions were somewhat faked. Nevertheless, no one paid much attention to it, as everyone experiences tragedy in their own way. While the search for the vehicle was underway, the police still believed that the car was the main target of the attacker, and the traces of the killer should be sought inside the car. Information about the missing car was placed in the media with a request to anyone who sees the car to immediately report it to the hotline. The car was found only a couple of weeks later in one of the parking lots on the outskirts of the city. The unremarkable gray Volkswagen Polo was noticed by the guard on duty because the car had not been taken away for a long time, but the guard had no idea that it was involved in a murder case. The police immediately impounded the car for a thorough examination and necessary forensic analysis. It was assumed that they would be able to find evidence and important clues there that would help trace the criminal and reconstruct the details of the crime. However, the investigators were completely disappointed. They could not find anything in the car. There were no blood traces, signs of struggle, or indications that the car owner had been taken somewhere by force. In the cabin, there were fingerprints and traces of DNA only from Nicole herself, as well as her husband, who also occasionally used the vehicle. Nevertheless, the investigators were not in a hurry to return the car to David because they felt that the evidence is there. They just do not lie on the surface. The irrefutable fact remained only that the young woman was killed with particular cruelty, but the motive of the crime was completely unclear. The hijacking theory now seemed untenable because the car was abandoned almost immediately on the other side of the city, and there were no signs of struggle inside it. The second obvious motive was violence, but this assumption was not confirmed. Experts found that the deceased had no sexual contacts, neither voluntary nor forced, at least a day before the crime. But in this case, the question remained open as to why she had no clothes on. The third theory was likely motivated by personal reasons or acute unpleasant feelings of the perpetrator towards the victim. The numerous injuries inflicted, as if in a fit of rage, support this assumption. However, the kind and sociable Nicole, who was eager to help everyone around her, had no known enemies or ill-wishers. This difficult case had all chances to remain unsolved because, after almost a year, the investigation had no new leads or directions for the search for the criminal. No one saw the code and who abandoned the car in the parking lot because the place itself was not crowded and there were no surveillance cameras in the area. But what was strange was that the person driving the car was much taller and larger than the victim, as evidenced by the position of the driver's seat. Suspicious was also the fact that the case was assigned the status of secrecy, and information about the course of the investigation, as well as about new facts and found evidence, was not disclosed even to the relatives of the victim. The mother, stepfather, and husband were, in fact, in the dark. They received only partial information. For instance, Nicole's bank card was used at a certain gas station in the country after her disappearance. The police requested the video footage from the cameras there, but what they saw remained a mystery. Nicole's parents, despairing that there were no results and their daughter's killer was still at large, decided to conduct an independent investigation on their own. To do this, they hired a private detective to gather all the information and verify some of their assumptions, and announced a reward of $10,000 for anyone who could provide any useful information on the subject. The reward was later increased to $35,000, but it still didn't help advance the case. David only showed interest in the investigation for the first 6 months, but after that, he gradually withdrew, stopped communicating with his mother-in-law and father-in-law, and soon remarried and had an heir for Gail. This news was a heavy blow because her daughter could not have children, and David constantly reproached his wife for this. The grief-stricken mother repeatedly suggested that the culprit could be her son-in-law, but many believed that in her resentment speaks, and the police seemed not to consider such a theory at all. An unexpected twist in the case. It was not until 6 years after the crime that it was revealed that David had been taken into custody as the primary suspect in the case. For most people who followed the investigation, such a turn of events was a complete surprise, but not for Nicole's family and friends, who had suspected him from the beginning and openly discussed their suspicions during the lengthy investigation. They seemed disappointed with the justice system, but now justice had been served. David himself, who by that time had changed his place of residence and stopped contact with his first wife's family, was discouraged when the handcuffs were snapped on his wrists because he thought that the case had long been closed and no one was looking for the criminal. He categorically denied his guilt and even agreed to take a lie detector test, which he failed miserably. As it turned out, the police also from the beginning suspected David, but they had no hard evidence proving his guilt. They did not want to scare the criminal and make him hide, so all these years, the investigators were busy with the fact that the pieces of evidence to collect so that the culprit was deserved punishment. David himself probably thought he had committed the perfect crime and no one would ever get on his trail. However, the crime had a number of oddities, each of which had to be checked. Let's start perhaps with the surveillance footage from the same gas station where someone used the debit credit card of the deceased Nicole. The footage clearly showed a man using the card who resembled David, but it was impossible to definitively identify him due to his wearing a headdress and dark glasses. Although this recording could not be considered ironclad evidence, it was still included in the case file. The second oddity was the absence of Nicole's wedding ring, which she never left the house without. At first, everyone thought the jewelry had been stolen by a criminal, but during the search of the victim's house, the ring was found in a box on the dressing table. Additionally, the forensic experts discovered a special dental mouthguard in Nicole's mouth, which she had been prescribed to use during sleep to prevent bruxism, teeth grinding. Nicole had been prescribed this device shortly before the tragedy because she was experiencing uncontrollable spasms of her chewing muscles due to nervousness, which had led to the erosion of her tooth enamel and chipping of her teeth. This finding led the investigation to believe that the victim had been killed in her own bed while she was still asleep. This explained the lack of clothing on her body and the fact that it was completely clean, with no signs of resistance. There was also no trace of makeup on Nicole's face, which she always carefully applied before leaving the house. About the mouthguard, by the way, David could simply forget because his wife began to use it recently. In addition, experts have studied in detail and assessed the position of the driver's seat in the found car, finding that the anthropometric data of the last person who sat behind the wheel coincide with the data of the spouse of the murdered. In addition, in the car, as already mentioned, only the fingerprints of David and Nicole were found. If a third person had been in the cabin, their traces would have been found, and if they had erased them, they would have erased the traces and prints of the car's owners as well. One more important discovery was made thanks to the rapid development of technology. The perpetrator, after his crime, in an attempt to confuse the investigation, several times used the victim's phone in different parts of the city. But in the same places and at the same time, there was a signal from David's phone. As it turned out, David also had a motive. In this perfect-looking family, a serious crisis was long overdue. While Nicole was studying hard, working 2 jobs, and helping people cope with their addiction, Her husband led an idle lifestyle. He never held down a job for long, liked to spend time in bars and clubs, and spent his wife's earnings on booze and other women. As a result, the family faced serious financial problems, which only worsened over time. Nicole tried to persuade her husband to take responsibility, give up partying, and start attending AA meetings to cope with his addiction. But in response, David only laughed, calling his wife terribly boring and complex. It also turned out that David systematically cheated on his wife with various random mistresses and repeatedly offered his wife to join them. Nicole always responded with an emphatic refusal, and once, her husband tried to get her drunk to force her to do it. Gail knew about all the horrors in her daughter's family and tried to convince her to leave her husband, but she did not want to do it because she loved him and hoped that David would change. After Nicole's mysterious death, her husband rushed to get a large insurance payment and immediately started a new affair. A few months before the tragedy, David, who had not been faithful before, had an affair with a girl named Jane. He spent time with her in bars and clubs while his wife was busy working or studying. Shortly before Nicole's birthday, he brought his mistress straight home, where they were caught by the suddenly returned Nicole. It was this circumstance that became the cause of that family quarrel. Nicole told her mother about the incident, with whom she was very close, and a couple of days later, she mysteriously disappeared. Since Gail was aware of everything that was going on, she suspected her son-in-law from the beginning. However, the police insisted that the evidence gathered was too little to send the suspect to jail. Then the case was classified, and the family stopped receiving any information about the investigation. Over the years, the parents lost all hope that the culprit would be punished. When David received an impressive insurance payout after his wife's death, he spent that money with Jane. Gail suggested that David's mistress could be an accomplice or inspirer of the crime, but she was only brought in as a witness because no evidence proving her involvement was found during the investigation. David appeared before the court in September 2013, but he continued to categorically deny his involvement in the tragedy. His defense lawyers initially insisted that all the evidence against their client was circumstantial and could not unequivocally prove his guilt. When it became apparent that there were too many incriminating factors, the defense changed tactics, trying to make David look like a victim. The story of the pain pills that Nicole took after her back injury was discussed. The lawyers also tried to convince the court that Nicole had a relapse and started drinking alcohol again, making her husband's life unbearable. However, these claims were baseless, and everyone who knew Nicole confirmed this. Furthermore, even if Nicole had a relapse, it would not have justified David's actions in killing his wife, especially with such cruelty. The guilt of the defendant was eventually fully proven, and for his crime, he received the maximum possible sentence provided by the law of the state in which the case was heard. David went to prison for 18 years. However, in 2025, he can count on parole after serving 2/3 of his sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michael Van Eck. The city of Welcome gained widespread attention due to a grievous crime that occurred there in 2011. When the criminals were identified, the prosecution was baffled. This notorious case became the 10th in the history of international criminal activity. During the investigation, it was discovered that the case involved followers of Satanism and occultism. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987 in the city of Welcome. He became the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Ariana. The boy grew up in a large and close-knit family. His parents were caring and loving people who provided a decent life for their children. The head of the family worked hard and organized his own business. The mother created a favorable atmosphere in the home for the growth and development of the younger generation. Michael was sociable and kind, and showed diligence in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which he was very proud of. This gave him confidence and resilience. After finishing school, The young man trained as an electrician. This in-demand profession opened the doors to good earnings and promising work. The young man worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix mine in the small town of Thunison. He did not stop there and continued his education to become an engineer. In 2011, Michael signed up on a dating site. He did this to distract himself from a breakup and to meet new people. It appeared that fortune was on his side. One day, among the many photos and profiles, the lonely young man became interested in the profile of a sweet and smiling girl. As they corresponded, the young man discovered that their interests aligned. Like him, she disliked noisy parties and drunken gatherings, and sought true love and a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to find a suitable match on the internet, especially since he still lived with his parents. He shared his joys and concerns with his mother on April 2nd. The son boasted to her that he was going on a date, and he prepared thoroughly for it to please the girl. He withdrew his first paycheck of 8,000 rand from his card. The only thing that troubled the young man was the unusual place his friend chose for their first meeting. It was the city cemetery. Apparently not to worry his parents, he kept quiet about it. Around 9 p.m. that same day, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house. He headed to the designated place in a silver Peugeot 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age, as tradition demanded. The girl was a little late, but her appearance was impressive. The stranger from the internet arrived in a pristine white dress and smiled. The conversation was relaxed, after which she suggested continuing the evening further and invited the young man to a distant part of the cemetery. There, a meadow awaited them with a spread blanket. On it lay a basket of fruits and wine. After the young people had a glass each, the beautiful companion kissed a stunned Michael. Suddenly, the pleasant feeling of the kiss turned to pain and horror. The unsuspecting young man became part of a sinister plan, since the innocent appearance of his pen pal did not match her inner world. Shanae Van Heerden was born in 1991 during a crisis period for her parents. When her mother found out she was pregnant, the couple decided to delay their divorce and give their relationship another chance. However, their attempts to reconcile and improve their life together were unsuccessful. The family environment only worsened. Her mother openly disliked the little girl, seeing her as a tie to her husband. After the divorce, she took the children and moved away from her former husband. However, the failed marriage was not the main reason for her coldness. She continued to lack love and attention towards her children even after the relationship ended. All 3 children felt lonely and misunderstood, but Shanae suffered the most. She grew up withdrawn and sullen. From an early age, she exhibited psychological issues. She talked about death and drew incomprehensible pictures. Eventually, the little girl developed an imaginary friend named Azazel. Concerned about their daughter's behavior, her grandparents thought she was possessed. Thus, they decided to take her to church, where she underwent an exorcism ritual. According to a witness, her body convulsed during the prayers. In reality, Shanae was scared of crowds and clearly frightened by the ordeal. The shock could have triggered an epileptic seizure. The traumatic event deeply impacted the young girl's memory, causing her to develop a fear of the dark. Additionally, her mother once told her that toys come to life at night, which led the frightened daughter to tape her doll's eyes shut and tie their bodies with shoelaces. As she grew older, her mental condition worsened. At age 10, she nearly harmed a houseguest with a knife while visiting her father. Only after this incident did they seek psychiatric help for Shanae. Following a specialist's evaluation, she was prescribed sedatives. The medication had a positive effect on her mood and well-being. She became calmer and more friendly. During a remission period, her father spent more time with his daughter. He often picked her up from school and took her hunting with him. By sharing his hobby, he aimed to give her the attention she lacked. The unstable teenager enjoyed her father's activity. She later confessed that she found pleasure in butchering carcasses and skinning animals. This led her to bring home dead animals, starting with rats and birds, and eventually progressing to cats and dogs. She enjoyed cutting flesh and occasionally inflicted injuries on herself. During an investigation, her sister revealed that at age 12, Shanae befriended an older man who introduced her to forbidden substances and took advantage of her condition. Her sisters did not inform their parents, but Shanae ended the destructive relationship. This experience undoubtedly had a negative impact on her troubled psyche. At age 15, her mother moved to New Zealand, where she met another man and stayed with him. Over time, she never returned for her children. They remained with their father and stepmother, who tried their best to provide for the children, though they did not fully understand the severity of the youngest daughter's issues. Her behavior was largely attributed to adolescence. The situation worsened a year later when Shanae became involved with a 22-year-old young man interested in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. The boyfriend became a real mentor to the impressionable young woman, but he was cruel in character, often suppressing and demeaning her. Nonetheless, a supportive family environment and psychotherapy yielded positive results. By her 17th birthday, Shanae's life began to improve. She broke off dangerous connections, graduated from high school, and enrolled in college, where she studied art and graphic design. After Shanae lost interest in Satanism and stopped using forbidden substances, her emotional state improved. She excelled in her studies and secured a job in her field. At her new job, Shanae found support not only from her colleagues, but also from management. It turned out she had a real talent for visual arts, which brought her respect and recognition in her professional field. At the same time, she started dating a man named Warren. To outsiders, her life appeared completely normal. Her family and close friends did not discuss her past, hoping that the difficult times were behind her. However, what was happening in her soul was hard to say. Perhaps her inner demons were merely lying dormant. Her father was the happiest for Shanae. He hoped that she had finally matured and would soon marry. However, his expectations were not met. The obstacle emerged from an unexpected source. Warren had a friend named Roy, who considered himself highly sensitive. Despite Shanae's sweet and friendly demeanor, he sensed something repellent and malevolent in her. Yet Roy's words were not taken seriously, as her outward appearance did not match his perceptions. One day, he pulled her aside and asked, "Who is Norman?" Each time he saw her, this name popped into the clairvoyant's mind. The young man thought she might not be faithful to his friend, so he decided to ask her directly. In response, Shanae unexpectedly spat in his face and demanded he stop bothering her with foolish questions. It later became known that Norman was the second name of Zazzle, her imaginary childhood friend. Following the incident, the dynamics between the young people changed. At one of the parties, Shanae's attention shifted to a 24-year-old named Martin. Although the young man was generally calm and sociable, there were unpleasant rumors about him. Martin Vander Marway was born into a well-off and respected family. Unlike Shanae, he had excellent relationships with both parents. As a child, he was smart and well-mannered, performing well academically. However, it turned out that since the age of 6, he had been suffering from a mental illness. Around that time, he began experiencing hallucinations. His parents recounted that, according to their son, a certain entity appeared to him, convincing the boy that he was endowed with incredible strength. Martin believed this and felt special. Gradually, his mental condition worsened and his behavior changed due to problems at school and home. At the age of 14, Vander Marway was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Unfortunately, conventional treatment did not help. Since the family was financially secure, his parents dedicated all their efforts to finding effective medications. Thanks to the efforts of both family and doctors, the necessary drugs were eventually found. With these, nearly all deviations were controlled, except for sporadic outbursts of aggression. Martins once witnessed a stray cat being mauled by dogs, which made a deep impression on him. Instead of feeling disgust or pity, he hid the animal's body and watched it. This led him to start torturing animals. He later dropped out of school and began helping his father in the carpentry shop. In the future, Martin dreamed of continuing the family tradition. While working, his condition improved. He no longer wanted to do bad things to animals and take their lives. For this reason, he stopped taking medication. Everyone was wary of his decision, but the young man insisted that the disease had receded and that he was in control. Unfortunately, this turned out to be an inevitable mistake. His mental state gradually deteriorated. It was around this time that Martins met Shawnee. These unstable young people found each other and began dating. However, outwardly they looked happy, so their parents were happy with their relationship. Of course, neither of them admitted to the problems their children had faced in the past. In the end, their union led to horrifying consequences. At first, the couple was open to the outside world, socializing and attending parties. Acquaintances recalled that they sometimes noticed cuts on the hands of the young people. They joked that they were engaged in intimate experiments. After that, they began to distance themselves from people. They became interested in Satanism, voodoo cults, and occult practices. They also became interested in infamous serial criminals. In February 2011, Martins posted a picture with Shawnee on one of his social media pages. The pair were hugging, and the caption under the photo read, "Killers," with an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took their post seriously. Eventually, the young man asked his girlfriend's father for a marriage license. Mr. Van Heron was incredibly happy. Gradually, their sick fantasies turned into a bloodthirsty plan. The crazy couple decided to torture the homeless to death, and they practiced on animals. However, their plan was never realized, as the criminals could not find a suitable victim. Their monstrous plan was waiting for the right moment. The encounter began when Shawnee posted her profile on a dating site. Before long, a young man named Michael Van Eck responded. The attractive young man caught the interest of the nefarious couple, and Shawnee targeted him for their plans. From the very first messages, the young people started flirting. After a few days of communication, the girl suggested they meet. Michael had been looking forward to this, but he hadn't expected it to come so soon or directly from her. Unfortunately, the somewhat unusual location for their first date didn't raise any alarms for him. Apparently, he was so eager to meet the charming conversationalist from the internet in person that he agreed to the dubious proposal. Shawnee and Martin meticulously prepared to bring their wild dream to life. They thought through everything thoroughly: the attire, the means to end a life, and even the setting. Shawnee approached the date fully prepared. The long-awaited meeting went exactly as planned for both parties. The victim fell for the bait. An angelic appearance of the girl and a kiss lulled his alertness. This gesture was the agreed-upon signal for Martin. All this time, the man had been hiding behind the tombstones. He approached Michael from behind and struck him with a knife. Unexpectedly for everyone, the young man resisted. The attackers hadn't anticipated this. Noticing that their new acquaintance was putting up a desperate fight, Shawnee intervened. Altogether, they inflicted about 30 knife wounds on the unfortunate young man. Ultimately, completely weakened, Michael begged them to end his suffering. Martin slit Michael's throat. After that, the unthinkable began. The perpetrators dragged the body onto the blanket and proceeded with their plan. The couple severed the young man's right and left legs at the knee and decapitated him. The severed parts were placed in bags. They then decided to hide the body at the site. However, they miscalculated one thing. They had no shovels. Thus, they had to dig the earth with their hands and knives. As a result, they could not make the grave deep enough. After burying the body halfway, the perpetrators left with their trophies. Along the way, they used the victim's vehicle. Martins initially took the wheel, but later handed control over to his companion. The surge of adrenaline prevented him from keeping his eyes on the road. Upon arriving home, they stored the bags with body parts in the refrigerator as if they were groceries. After Vander Marway had somewhat recovered, he started Michael's car and drove it to a troubled neighborhood. The criminals hoped the car would be stolen, so he left it unlocked with the keys in the ignition. The next day, a cemetery worker noticed a fresh burial that wasn't there the day before. His dreadful suspicions were confirmed when he stumbled upon bloody traces and torn clothing in the bushes. He then called over his supervisor to examine the grave. What the unintended witnesses found would long remain etched in their memory. Beneath the soil lay a dismembered male body. The authorities were immediately notified of the grim discovery. At the same time, Michael's parents were beside themselves with worry. Since the previous evening, he hadn't responded to calls. Even if it was presumed that he had stayed overnight at his internet girlfriend's place, he should have made contact by now. Instead, Michael's workplace called his parents. The concerned management wanted to understand why he was absent from a crucial site. Simultaneously, the police received a report about a Peugeot 207 found abandoned in a parking lot. Passers-by were alarmed by the bloodstains on the trunk. After running the vehicle through their database, the owner was identified. Detectives also tracked that before its discovery, the car had been at the cemetery for a long time. The local precinct was already aware of an unidentified body found on its grounds. All signs were suspicious. Armed with this information, law enforcement officials went to the residence of Michael Van Eck. Upon arrival, the officers confirmed their suspicions. His parents had been searching for the young man since the previous day. They asked Michael's mother to come to the cemetery, where forensic specialists and search dogs were already at work, desperately trying to locate missing body parts. At the scene, the woman recognized belongings found, and she also identified her son's body by distinctive burn marks he had sustained in childhood. During the autopsy, the medical examination revealed that the young man had suffered numerous knife wounds, with clear signs of a struggle. It was also determined that the body had been dismembered post-mortem. At least the perpetrators spared him this agony while he was alive. Notably, experts observed that the dismemberment was executed with professional precision, suggesting significant experience. There was no doubt that multiple attackers were involved, as indicated by the number and nature of the wounds and the strength required to subdue the victim. Ultimately, DNA testing confirmed the identity of 23-year-old Michael Van Eck. During the investigation, police confiscated the victim's cell phone and computer. It was established that the last person the young man had communicated with was Shawnee Van Heerden. According to their messages, she was the one who invited him to the ominous date at the cemetery. Subsequently, detectives contacted the potential suspect and invited her to give a statement. The young woman did not refuse and arrived with her boyfriend, Martins van der Merwe. The couple was interviewed separately. During the questioning, they confessed to being involved in the group ending of a life. Upon learning of the incident, the girl's father rushed to the station. He couldn't believe what he was hearing and asked his daughter if she really was involved in the accusations against her. Shawnee calmly confirmed and added that she would willingly do it again. She claimed she had dreamt of this ever since she started hunting with him. The cruel confession of the seemingly sweet girl shocked not only her father, but everyone present. Her boyfriend, Martins, also behaved defiantly as the case gained public attention. He did not hide his pleasure from the public scrutiny and posed for the cameras. It was clear that none of the accused felt remorse for their actions. It turned out that after the crime, if caught, the mad couple planned to end their lives, but the young man changed his mind, and his partner followed suit. They wanted to live. During the search of the young couple's apartment, police felt uneasy, to say the least. The environment was horrifying. The walls were adorned with portraits of Shawnee depicting her in various guises. In some, she was depicted without eyes, in others without a mouth or ears. All images of the girl were distorted. Additionally, the rooms contained ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and various objects of unclear purpose. Also found were belongings of the deceased young man, glasses, and a wallet. As Martins later confessed, they took Michael's money to buy necessary items for their next crime. However, the most horrifying discovery awaited in the refrigerator. From it, police retrieved Michael's head with the mouth sewn shut. It was assumed that the couple planned to use the young man's head as a ritual bowl. Later on, eyes and ears of the victim were stored in separate containers. The victim's hand and leg were found buried near the murderer's home, alongside the bodies of various animals. The girl's diary contained horrific thoughts and their impending realization. From everything discovered during the inspection, it was clear that the couple planned not just one more crime. The process of ending lives and subsequent mutilation of bodies provided them with unimaginable pleasure. Martins and Chenet underwent multiple evaluations for mental competence. Fortunately, the commission confirmed that the young individuals were aware of their actions and desired the inevitable consequences. Otherwise, they might have avoided punishment and received only mandatory treatment. In November 2011, the trial concerning Chenet took place, treating her as a serial offender despite this being a singular incident. She did not hide her desire to repeat her actions. She told the court that she understands she should feel shame or remorse, but for some reason, she does not comprehend the gravity of her actions through her own moral compass. She can only grasp the severity of her deeds through societal standards and the reactions of others. Psychiatrists declared that the defendant suffers from psychopathic and antisocial disorders, making her apparently more dangerous than her boyfriend, but she is adept at concealing it. Throughout the sentencing, she remained impassive. Chenet Van Heerden was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole, 20 years for ending a life, and an additional 15 for robbery and dismemberment. As for Martins, unlike his partner, he defended himself in court. He claimed not to remember the events that occurred until he found himself in jail and behaved arrogantly and aggressively. The defendant admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, trying to understand life and death. He said his relationship with Chenet pushed them both towards committing the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his words sounded insincere. He implied that the victim was simply at the wrong place at the wrong time, although in reality, the mad couple had lured the unfortunate man into a premeditated trap. The victim's mother could not contain her distress and struck the accused during one of the sessions. Ultimately, Martins van der Merwe was also found guilty of the charges against him and sentenced to 35 years in prison, but with a chance for parole after serving half of his sentence. Until 2014, the lovers kept in touch behind bars. In his letters, Martins called Chenet a dark goddess, writing, "Lady Blackmore, when you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out. They fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison, spreading beautiful darkness through my empty veins." Over time, Chenet ended the relationship with her former lover, feeling that they had grown cold and distant from each other. It is known that in prison, the woman behaves exemplarily, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Collectors fascinated by the lives of humanity's worst maniacs and offenders have paid large sums for a photograph of the woman with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. What is also monstrous in this story is how many troubled individuals there are among us. Sometimes behind an innocent facade lies sheer hell. New acquaintances do not always positively affect our lives. Sometimes they can mark a point of no return. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Courtney Holden. The narrative takes place in Spokane, Washington's second-largest city, located by the river bearing the same name. The Holden family, representing a typical American household, has long been residents of Spokane. Judy and John Holden had 2 daughters and an adopted son named Joshua. The adult daughters had moved out and lived independently for some time. However, their son Joshua remained with his parents. Joshua, a young man often described as large, melancholic, and perpetually gloomy, hadn't managed to start his own family and thus continued living in his parental home. The care provided by this family to children was unconventional. It began and ended merely with providing shelter. Judy and John did not spoil their foster children with attention or care. All foster children adhered to a strict schedule and were punished for any misdeeds. Judy's educational background and her own children's successful led guardianship authorities to trust them initially to place children under their foster care and eventually agree on adoption. The Holden family's desire for financial stability greatly influenced their decision to take more than 1 or 2 children under their wing, thereby shaping their unique form of childcare within this professional setting. On a certain day, a sweet 4-year-old girl named Courtney joined the Holden family. Born on February 28, 1992, she found herself in a shelter by age 2. Life there was not joyful, as for many children. Each new day in the orphanage began with a prayer. Children of various ages dreamily prayed for a mom and dad. One joyful day, Courtney's wish came true. Courtney moved to Spokane, and at just 4 years old, first stepped into the Holden home. She started living with Joshua and several other foster children. Yet, when the door closed behind her, her dreams of a caring family remained just that, dreams. If life in the shelter had seemed sad and joyless to Courtney, it turned into a real nightmare at the Holdens. From early childhood, she was forced to do all kinds of housework. Cleaning the entire house and washing dishes after every meal became routine. Any mistake led to punishment. It was especially surprising how differently the Holdens treated the other foster children. They were much kinder, and no one understood their harshness toward Courtney. Judy Holden was considerably older by then, and Courtney was the last child they took from the orphanage. Perhaps this masked an inexplicable malice toward her. Courtney couldn't step outside without permission. Visitors often heard Judy and Joshua mistreating her, calling her Cinderella, as if she were a fairy tale character enslaved by evil sisters and stepmother. Despite this oppressive environment, Courtney remained responsive over the years, but got used to harsh conditions. She feared her foster mother while Joshua instilled terror merely with his presence. He forbade her from socializing with peers and deprived her of modern conveniences such as a mobile phone. This paints a dark picture of Courtney's upbringing in an environment where care should have blossomed, but instead turned to confinement and distress for this young girl. She seldom left the house without necessity and permission. Enjoying a breath of fresh air or chatting with neighbors was something she only did when the house empty. Over time, as she matured into adulthood, she grew accustomed to this lifestyle. She did not become resentful. Instead, she always treated her foster parents with respect, knowing no other life and having no concept of a typical family. Courtney gained a bit of freedom when Joshua, through irreconcilable differences with their parents, moved to his sister's place for an extended period. For Courtney, this was the happiest time of her life, as she finally experienced a taste of freedom. She could freely leave the house, stroll around, and meet peers. Time passed, Courtney completed school and fell in love for the first time. Michael became a noteworthy partner for her. She felt care and attention from him that she had never received from anyone else. After each meeting, Courtney felt like she was on cloud 9. Their relationship continued until 2011, when they had a son together. Michael desperately pleaded with his beloved to move in with him and live as a full family. However, for some unknown reason, the young mother refused him and did not move out, continuing instead to reside in Holden's house, which she despised immensely. This decision also marked the end of her romantic relationship with Michael. By that time, the Holden house had become nearly empty as the foster children had grown up and moved out. John Holden, Courtney's foster father, had passed away. For a considerable period thereafter, she lived only with her foster mother, Judy, and her child. Michael was allowed to visit his son, only with Judy's permission. In the period following Courtney's brother Joshua's absence after their father's death in 2014, Joshua returned home and began fiercely terrorizing the family environment. He installed numerous surveillance cameras around their home on Hero Avenue, about a block from Rogers Middle School in Northeast Spokane. Signs bearing, "Smile, you're on camera," were scattered all over the yard, with multiple cameras pointing in different directions. The presence of these surveillance measures made Courtney anxious again, as it implied hostile repercussions from Joshua if she ventured outside. Courtney's life became intolerable once more around 2015, when she confided in a neighbor that she wasn't allowed to have a mobile phone or manage social media accounts, or communicate with anyone outside. Courtney's family couldn't drive a car or even leave the house without Joshua's permission. Joshua Holden was so embittered by the birth of her child that he forced her to cease all contact with her son's father. Courtney complied silently. Neighbors began to notice bruises on Courtney's face and arms. When asked about these injuries, she admitted candidly that Joshua hit her. Concerned neighbors wondered why Courtney tolerated such treatment and tried in various ways to help her. They contacted the police to draw attention to her plight, but the Holdens quashed each case because Courtney never openly admitted she was under family terror from her brother. Eventually, Courtney was stripped of the privilege of speaking with neighbors. Since then, they only saw her outside during the evenings, as she wasn't allowed out during day. Again, she silently obeyed. No one knew Joshua like Courtney did. He was tall, large, overweight, and possessed enormous physical strength. His friends described him as paranoid, cruel, and unpredictable in nature. He once bragged publicly about his ability to end life easily and dispose of a body without difficulty. Joshua had a notable criminal record. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but was released due to a lack of evidence and the victim's unwillingness to cooperate with the police. He was also suspected of an assault and misconduct against a woman in 2003, when the perpetrator couldn't be identified. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and burglary. These incidents prompted his flight from the parental home for several years. Upon his return, Joshua became even more ferocious. He installed cameras not just outside, but also inside the house to maintain complete control over Courtney. She was afraid to go anywhere, fearing Joshua would find out and things would escalate. One person communicated with Courtney daily through Facebook until Joshua discovered she had an account. "I have to go. I must leave. Josh is coming," she said in her last message nearly years ago. Then her went dark permanently. The dynamics within the Holden household were described by family acquaintances as peculiar. Those familiar with the family were puzzled as to why Courtney's child referred to Judy as mom and Joshua as dad, while his biological mother was addressed strictly by her first name. This led some to speculate that perhaps Joshua was indeed the child's father. Neighbors and acquaintances condemned the Holdens for their unusual lifestyle and antisocial behavior, opting to steer clear of their home. In August 2018, following yet another dispute, Courtney hastily packed her belongings into a suitcase and ran out onto the street. An irate Judy shouted after her, "Come back home," to which Courtney replied, "I won't stay here anymore." Moments later, an enraged Joshua, standing over 6 feet tall and weighing 300 pounds, forcefully lifted 160-pound Courtney and carried her back into the house. Judy slammed the door shut. According to a neighbor who witnessed this altercation, she couldn't resist. This was the last time this neighbor saw Courtney. It took almost 2 years before neighbors and acquaintances began to worry about her disappearance. In October 2019, a year and a half after she vanished, concern for Courtney Holden's whereabouts came from her father and his current girlfriend. They hadn't seen Courtney for almost 2 years, and the father was eager to see his child. He filed a missing person report with the police on October 24th. The police, armed with a search warrant, went to the Holden residence and were surprised to find Courtney indeed not there. Neither Joshua nor Judy was willing to cooperate with authorities. Courtney's stepmother allowed detectives to peek into her room, but then asked them to leave the house as soon as possible. Search dogs were even brought in, but yielded no results. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her son and ran away. However, they couldn't explain who continued cashing the Social Security benefits deposited into her account or who was using the electronic food stamps. On the same day authorities searched the Holden home, Judy and Joshua withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. The next day, a curious coincidence occurred. An unknown woman claiming to be Courtney called the National Center for Criminal Information in America. She stated she was safe and didn't want to be searched for. However, police traced the call and identified the caller as one of Courtney's stepsisters. Joshua and Judy later provided multiple contradictory stories about Courtney's disappearance. At one point, they claimed she ran away with a truck driver. In another version, she had left with a secret lover unknown to everyone else. The inconsistency and variation in their accounts made them obvious suspects. Their behavior appeared suspicious and indicated they were hiding something significant. By the end of October 2019, Joshua and Judy fled Spokane. This hasty departure only reinforced detectives' suspicions regarding their involvement in Courtney's disappearance. Authorities eventually tracked them down in Texas at the home of one of Judy's adopted daughters. In Texas, officials charged them with cashing benefits intended for Courtney and with identity theft, permitting their arrest and detention in a Texas jail. Initially intended as a welfare check by the Spokane Police Department in early October, Courtney's case quickly escalated into a missing person investigation handled by major crimes detective Randy Lesser. Detective Lesser discussed the investigation with the Spokesman Review following the public release of his search warrants filed in Spokane County Superior Court. This report on Courtney's disappearance is based on police interviews and court records. Courtney was officially declared missing shortly afterward. Alerts were disseminated nationwide, and several news broadcasts highlighted her case, triggering an extensive search operation. Despite visits from patrol officers and detectives for various reasons, Joshua and Judy consistently refused to cooperate with the investigation, a highly unusual response in welfare checks and missing person cases. On the day Courtney was declared missing, a woman claiming to be her called Crime Check to say she was fine. The police dispatcher also spoke with the woman claiming to be Courtney. Later, it was discovered that it was actually Courtney's sister who did not reveal why she had impersonated her, presumably to deflect suspicion from Judy and halt the search efforts. "I'm concerned that she might potentially be deceased," Lesser said in an interview with the spokesman. Lesser expressed particular concern about Joshua's history of violence. Joshua had been charged with assault in the past, but the case was dropped shortly before trial when the victim ceased cooperating with the prosecution. Investigators were in the process of obtaining DNA evidence, and court documents from that case indicated that Holden was suspected in another assault back in 2003. Neighbors and family described Joshua as unstable, cruel, and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. A neighbor mentioned that Joshua was unemployed and that Judy feared him. Joshua had also been arrested on charges related to unlawful imprisonment and domestic violence, and he had been convicted of burglary. Family members said that Joshua and Judy boasted about knowing ways to evade police. They also said Joshua made comments about how easy it would be to end someone's life and hide the body. "People don't just disappear, especially when they have a child," Lesser remarked. Court documents stated that Courtney was a loving mother who would never abandon her child. Over the 1.5 years Courtney was not seen outside her home, Joshua and Judy told neighbors and family she was traveling with a boyfriend, an unnamed truck driver nobody met. Sometimes rumors circulated that she had run off with a fiancé. Other times she was supposedly just inside the house but unavailable for visits. Judy told Lesser that Courtney had been home just a few days before when he knocked on their door. In early October, Courtney reportedly left on foot with her son. When Detective Lair asked for Judy's phone number, she shut the door in his face. According to court documents, she eventually allowed police inside to see Courtney's room, but appeared very nervous. The house was extremely cluttered. Piles of items covered all available space on counters, Lesser wrote in the court documents. Similarly, Courtney's room was cluttered and the mattress was bare. It seemed that no one had lived there for some time, Lesser noted. At one point, Judy panicked when she lost sight of a detective behind a closed door. She ordered investigators to leave when Lesser requested to check the rest of the house for Courtney's child. Later that day, a neighbor informed Lur they saw Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters leaving in a van with a child. Detective Lesser also found it suspicious that Courtney had not seen a doctor since October 2017, despite suffering from a chronic illness. Her last prescription was filled in July 2018, though she had been obtaining medications monthly before disappearing. Despite this gap in medical records, money continued to be withdrawn from Courtney's bank account each month, and her card was used for grocery shopping. Surveillance footage confirmed Joshua and Judy shopping with a small child. The cameras also recorded them withdrawing the remaining money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing in early October. By October 24th, Joshua and Judy had vacated their home. Lesser noted that the DVR from the home surveillance system had been removed and the family's 6 pets were gone when police arrived to execute the search warrant. Mobile numbers associated with Joshua and Judy were deactivated in mid-November. However, 2 new numbers were activated on the account with Texas area codes on the same day. About a month after the Holdens left, a neighbor called police to report activity at the house. It turned out to be one of Judy's daughters and her husband, who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They mentioned they hadn't seen Courtney for 2 years and that Judy had retired. The man informed the police that Joshua and Judy had a child. However, Judy's daughter claimed the child was Courtney. In mid-December, Lesser traveled to Texas searching for Joshua and Judy. The police located them at Judy's daughter's house along with Courtney's son. Joshua and Judy Holden faced arrest charges including identity theft, interference with custody, using Courtney's bank accounts, and concealing her child. The child was found safe and returned to his father. No criminal charges were made against other family members. The police conducted a thorough search of Judy's Spokane home with search dogs, but found no trace of Courtney. Similarly, searches of the home in Texas yielded no clues regarding Courtney's whereabouts. Officers also inspected a vehicle and trailer owned by Judy, parked at an RV lot in Oklahoma. 40-year-old Joshua and 74-year-old Judy were detained in Texas, where they refused to be interviewed by the police and declined extradition to Spokane. As a result, the police awaited a governor's warrant for their return. Since the police could not establish their involvement in Courtney's disappearance, Joshua and Judy were likely released. This is probably one of the deepest missing person cases, Lesser stated regarding the month-long investigation. Despite claiming no involvement in Courtney's disappearance, police believe she is likely deceased, but remain unable to prove it. Although Judy and Joshua have been charged with various offenses, they have not been charged with anything directly related to Courtney's disappearance. Nonetheless, many still believe they know what happened to her. In addition to Joshua's known aggressive behavior, he also stated he could end someone's life and successfully hide the body from the police. Investigators believe Courtney is deceased, but they have not made any arrests related to her case yet. Summing up today's story, it's heartbreakingly clear that Courtney was unfortunate to become part of the Holden family. This young girl, who dreamed of family and love, lacked the courage to stand up for herself. She wholeheartedly believed that even these people who yelled at her, mistreated her, and forced her to work for them were her family. But should one really need to defend themselves from their own family? It's a profound regret that the bold claims made by Joshua Holden in public about being able to end a life and hide a body cannot be used as evidence of his involvement in Courtney's disappearance. Especially since after that fateful evening, when he forcefully took her back into the house, she was never seen again. No one knows what she had to endure in those dreadful moments and what atrocities were committed behind closed doors by these monsters who called themselves parents. There are countless ways to discreetly dispose of a body using various chemicals that neither experts can identify nor police dogs can detect. This suggests that if Courtney was harmed that evening, her spirit still lingers in the Holden estate, where she sought a family but found her demise instead. Her young son was removed from the Holden household and placed under the care of his father, where he remains to this day. Courtney Holden is still listed as missing. If you have any information that could aid the investigation, please contact the Spokane Police Department. In June 2018, in Melbourne, Australia, a promising comedian named Yuri Dixon showcased her talent on stage at a bar. Her performance was bold and often delved into the theme of gender equality. These moments, captured in photographs by a colleague, turned out to be the final images of the 22-year-old. Unbeknown to anyone at the time, just hours after these photos were taken, Yuri Dixon's life would be tragically cut short. Jane Dixon was born on November 10, 1995, in Melbourne, Australia. She grew up in a closely knit family. 6 years after her birth, her younger sister arrived. Tragically, a year later, their mother passed away due to severe substance dependence issues. This left their father, Jeremy Dixon, with the sole responsibility of raising his daughters. He worked tirelessly, and the Dixon family led a modest life in a small top-floor apartment of a 3-story building. Neighbors remembered Jane as a quiet, polite, and somewhat reserved young girl. Her friends affectionately referred to her as Ray. She had a passion for the arts. She pursued dramaturgy at Deakin University and participated in a theater troupe. Jane was not only an actress and comedian, but also a writer who created her own scripts for performances. Jane's love for drama was evident. Like many comedians, she relished challenging societal norms, a trait that consistently shone through in her acts. In 2018, at the age of 22, Jane Dixon made a significant mark at the International Comedy Festival in Melbourne with her solo stand-up show titled, "At Home, I Feel Like a Tourist." Her performance captivated the audience and elicited roars of laughter with her loud and daring humor. Jane demonstrated a fearless approach to comedy by addressing complex and often challenging topics to diverse audiences. Despite her success, some of her humor occasionally missed the mark with younger audience members. Nonetheless, Yuri Dixon was a feminist who fearlessly incorporated her values into her humor. She was deeply engaged with issues pertaining to women and social justice, often choosing these themes for her performances. Her social media bio read, "I'm a girl sometimes perplexed by the world around me. This show and my jokes are about that." Her friends saw a bright future for her on stage, believing Dixon to be a promising talent. Colleagues described her as introverted and quiet, yet exceptionally intelligent for her age. Both groups unanimously agreed that Dixon possessed a genuine comedic gift. Yuri Dixon performed in bars for free, using these opportunities to gain experience, attract fans, learn how to captivate an audience, and sharpen her skills. On Tuesday, June 12, 2018, Yuri Dixon performed at a local bar just 3 miles from her home. That night, as usual, she humorously tackled gender equality and her constant worries. "Sometimes I think, will I wake up in a society of slaves? You know, just girl jokes, just ordinary stuff," she joked in her last act. She whimsically spoke about robots taking over the world, hoping that by then we'd all be gone. She remarked that a robot-ruled world wouldn't be bleak, as it would mean gender equality, everyone subjugated to robots equally. Following her performance, Yuri Dixon met with her boyfriend Tony Magnuson, who had been in the audience. They shared a soda at the bar. At 10:40 p.m., they left and stopped at a nearby supermarket to buy protein bars. Then Yuri decided to walk home alone. They embraced, said their goodbyes, and Tony got on a tram as Yuri sent him an air kiss and waved goodbye. Yuri was unaware that she was being observed by someone, not just a casual onlooker, but a predator. Yuri Dixon's journey home spanned streets, a park, and 3 soccer fields, covering about 3 miles. This was usually an hour's walk at a relaxed pace, and she felt the route was safe, having walked it at night before. The streets were well lit, but upon entering Princess Park, darkness enveloped her. To shorten her path, she removed her shoes and socks, walking barefoot on the grass. She traversed the park and 2 soccer fields, with just a short distance remaining to her home at midnight, exactly 12:02 a.m. Yuri messaged her boyfriend Tony on Facebook, "I'm almost home. Where are you?" Mere minutes. Following this message, a tragic event took place on the night of June 13th at approximately 2:50 a.m. A passerby found Yuri Dixon on a soccer field in Princess Park. The passerby quickly called for an ambulance and police, attempting to administer CPR to Dixon. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Yuri had been strangled and was already deceased. Surveillance cameras were installed around the park. The police promptly reviewed the footage and spotted Dixon walking alone through the park with a young man following her at a distance of about 100 feet. This individual had fluffy golden hair, unkempt stubble, and appeared overweight, short, and stocky, moving with a bear-like shuffle. To advance the investigation, the police released the surveillance video to local TV channels and made a public appeal for anyone who recognized this person to come forward. On the evening of June 13th, 19-year-old James Todd contacted the police. He reported that friends had been calling him after seeing his face on the news in connection with Yuri Dixon's death in Princess Park. James firmly denied any involvement in her death and insisted he was not the person in the footage. The police requested that James come to the station for questioning. Upon arrival, he continued asserting his innocence, responding to numerous questions and maintaining he had no connection to the crime. Additionally, James agreed to provide a DNA sample. After Yuri Dixon's body was found, an impromptu memorial emerged at the site where people brought flowers to honor her memory. A significant crowd, numbering in tens of thousands, gathered to remember her on June 18, 2018, 5 days after the tragedy. A vigil was scheduled on the football field in Yuri's memory. However, this event was overshadowed by a disturbing act that occurred the night before the vigil, when someone painted an enormous 75-foot depiction of male genitalia on the grass. Firefighters and municipal workers discovered it upon arrival. This heinous act did not diminish the community's resolve as they came together to honor Yuri's memory with dignity and respect despite these unfortunate events. Removing the paint proved impossible, so the team had to excavate and replace sections of the lawn, costing $20,000. The culprit was quickly identified as Andre Melton, a 29-year-old blogger and men's rights activist who was also a Scientologist. Melton openly admitted that his motive was to provoke anger among feminists. Initially, James Todd insisted on his innocence. However, during a follow-up interrogation, when the detective mentioned DNA evidence from the crime scene undergoing analysis, Todd's demeanor changed. He lowered his head and stated further testing was unnecessary. Todd then confessed to being in Princess Park on the night of Yuri Dixon's tragic death and admitted his guilt in her murder and assault. In November 2018, James Todd recounted in detail his activities on June 12th. His day began with college classes in Broadmeadows, a suburb of Melbourne, which lasted until 3 p.m. After classes, James met 3 college friends at the station. They bought strong liquor and rolling papers for cigarettes before taking a train to Melbourne. They spent some time in Batman Park sharing alcohol. When they ran out of booze, James purchased cider and obtained marijuana from some individuals around 8 p.m. One friend left while James and the remaining 2 headed back to the station, where they purchased another bottle of liquor and Coca-Cola. The trio then took a train back towards Broadmeadows, each disembarking at different stations. James got off first at Newmarket Station around 9 p.m., while his friends continued their journey. James described how after disembarking at Newmarket Station around 9:35 p.m., he aimlessly roamed the streets. He made his way towards Elizabeth Street and at 10:43 p.m. first noticed Yuri Dixon near a supermarket with her boyfriend Tony. After stopping briefly at McDonald's for a snack, James returned to where he initially saw Yuri. He observed her blowing a kiss to her boyfriend as he left. Yuri then started her walk home with James discreetly following her. She seemed unaware of his presence. However, he experienced a strong, inexplicable attraction towards her. James decided to follow the young woman in a black dress, later identified as 22-year-old Yuri Dixon. He shadowed her for approximately an hour across the city, maintaining a distance of about 150 feet between them. Whenever Eurydice slowed down, James would pause to smoke. Surveillance cameras recorded them passing by the University of Melbourne at 11:54 p.m. Shortly afterwards, Eurydice texted her boyfriend, Tony, informing him that she was nearly home. This message was sent as she walked through Princess Park. Just minutes after sending that text, around midnight, Eurydice found herself in a life-threatening situation. As she was crossing the third soccer field, James Todd approached her from behind. He grabbed her hair and dress, knocked her down, and pinned her to the ground. James then sat on her chest and seized her neck. In a desperate attempt to defend herself, Eurydice fought back, scratching at his face, neck, and shoulders. Despite her efforts, James overpowered her. After satisfying his urges, he briefly contemplated repeating his actions but lacked the physical strength. Ultimately, he forcibly strangled Eurydice until she passed away. James Todd later told investigators that upon first seeing Eurydice, he assumed she was intoxicated and wanted to engage her in conversation, as he thought it would be amusing. Contrary to his assumption, the autopsy conducted on Eurydice revealed no presence of alcohol or illegal substances in her system. The medical examiners concluded that Dixon's cause of death was due to strangulation accompanied by blunt force trauma to her head and other parts of her body. After committing the crime, James took the victim's phone and left the park. He found a bench at a bus stop and slept there until 4 a.m. Upon waking up, he used the phone to take a selfie to check the scratches on his face and body. He then went into some bushes nearby where he used the restroom and removed his t-shirt, wiping himself with it before leaving it behind. It had an image of a skull, along with the caption, "What Men Fear." James then returned to Princess Park, where police were already conducting their investigation into the harrowing incident. He left the park, reached a stop, and then made his way home, purchasing coffee and a pie along the way. By 7 a.m., he was home, where immediately went online to look up Princess Park. The first news he came across was about the tragic incident. Following this, he began searching for adult films, specifically looking for content similar to what had transpired with Juicy the previous night. He meticulously went through 4 pages of search results. That evening, a friend informed him that he had been seen on TV in a news report about the deceased girl. Following this call, James obtained the number for the police station and decided to contact them. Investigators discovered that James Todd's visits to explicit websites and his interest in certain types of videos were not new behaviors. In the years preceding the crime, James had harbored fantasies involving violent acts. His girlfriend, who had been in a relationship with him for 4 years, noted that during intimate moments he had a tendency to grab her neck. However, further investigation into his internet search history revealed that James was exploring much more extreme and violent scenarios than what he had exhibited in their relationship. 19-year-old James Todd was both a student and worker, aspiring to a career as a restaurateur and pursuing education in that field. He lived with his parents and had a habit of staying up late to watch adult videos. Specifically, he gravitated towards videos where a woman inevitably met her demise at the end. This obsession grew to such an extent that he yearned to recreate them in real life. This compulsive idea increasingly dominated his thoughts, disturbing his peace and impacting his ability to live normally. James Todd's living conditions were extremely poor. When police visited his family's home, they described it as one of the most dilapidated residences they had ever encountered. The Todd household comprised 5 members, the parents and 3 sons, with James being the middle child. In sum, these findings painted a broader picture of James's deteriorating mental state and unhealthy obsessions, which ultimately culminated in tragic actions affecting not only himself but those around him too. Their living environment was in complete disarray, compounded by the presence of numerous pets and a kitchen that had collapsed due to rotting floors. Cooking had been reduced to using a stove placed in the bathroom, right next to a perpetually clogged toilet. Clutter, trash, and debris filled every room, making the house nearly uninhabitable. Food waste was scattered wherever it fell. James rarely spent time at home, opting instead to sleep on desks during classes or on park benches. His mother admitted that the grim state of their home was partly due to her struggle with depression. Nevertheless, James stated that their living conditions had always been neglected. The father's role or involvement in the family situation was not specifically mentioned. Before committing the crime, James Todd had already distanced himself from his family home. He preferred to spend most of his time at his girlfriend's residence. His girlfriend noticed a change in his behavior, which she attributed to the stress of finishing college and uncertainty about his future prospects in the restaurant industry. During the trial, it was revealed that James had been diagnosed in childhood with mild autism spectrum disorder and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He exhibited intense interest in dinosaurs, playing almost exclusively with dinosaur toys, and frequently having tantrums over various everyday situations, such as issues with food and household items. In his teenage years, James Todd received psychiatric treatment numerous times due to concerns from his teachers about his antisocial behavior. It's essential to understand that autism or Asperger's syndrome presents diversely and is not inherently linked to harmful sexual tendencies. In James's case, 2 psychiatrists who had worked with him and thoroughly reviewed his condition concluded he exhibited signs of a sadistic personality disorder. They believed this disorder contributed significantly to the tragic events. Both medical professionals agreed there is no direct causal relationship between autism and criminal behavior. They suggested that, in James' case, the interplay of his autism and the sadistic elements of his personality likely played a role, leading to the tragic outcome. James Todd's friends saw him as a sociable and cheerful individual, not seeming different from others. They noticed he could apologize, distinguish right from wrong, and behave rationally. However, a psychiatrist who assessed him found a deficit in his social interactions, indicating possible underlying issues. During the legal proceedings, 2 psychiatrists presented differing views on Todd's crime. One psychiatrist believed that James hadn't fully decided to commit the attack until the moment it started, suggesting his actions were somewhat spontaneous. In contrast, the other psychiatrist argued that James's primary intention was to actualize his disturbing fantasies. This view suggests that Todd knew what might happen with Yuri and acted deliberately to fulfill these fantasies. At the trial, James Todd made a striking declaration. He felt relieved at being caught. He admitted feeling terrified when he realized he had turned his long-held thoughts into reality. The judge concluded that James had intentionally murdered a defenseless young woman driven by perverse desires and the intent to manifest his depraved fantasies. On September 2, 2019, James Todd was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years. When eligible for parole, he will be 54 years old. Jason Todd, James Todd's father, took to social media to express condolences to the Dixon family and conveyed his personal sense of loss. He mentioned fearing that he might never have the opportunity to hug his son again, along with these sentiments. Jason shared screenshots of various insults and criticisms directed at him, labeling those who criticized him as spiteful. After, he decided to delete all these posts from his social media page. Todd's legal team sought to appeal his life sentence, arguing it was excessively severe. They highlighted several factors in their argument. Todd was only 19 at the time of the offense, had no prior criminal history, and many described him as a good and kind individual. Additionally, his lawyers pointed to his full admission of guilt and expressed remorse, along with his autism diagnosis and the deplorable living conditions in his family home, as mitigating circumstances. Despite these arguments, the appeal was ultimately rejected. Detectives who worked on the Dixon case noted that James Todd's current prison cell offers significantly better living conditions compared to his former home. He's known to keep his cell exceptionally clean. Todd reportedly feels deep remorse for his actions, and life seems especially tough for him compared to typical inmates. Psychiatrists on the case believe that if Todd were released, he would pose a significant threat to women. Following the unfortunate death of UEC Dixon, the bar where she had her last comedy performance decided to cancel their Tuesday comedy nights in her honor, aiming to continue her legacy. Additionally, the Melbourne government introduced grants aimed at supporting emerging female comedians. Regarding blogger Andrew Ench, who desecrated Yuri Dixon's memorials, he was found guilty and sentenced to 5 months in prison. This incident brought some notoriety to Ench, leading him to give several interviews afterward. In one of these interviews, he disclosed that his actions were not merely an expression of his stance against feminism, but also stemmed from his vocal criticism of vaccination. He believes vaccines cause autism. The tragic passing of Yuri Dixon reignited discussions on women's safety and gender inequality. In response to the incident, police advised women to be more vigilant at night, suggesting they avoid walking alone and always carry a mobile phone. On the other hand, many feminists argue that it shouldn't fall on women to change their habits. They stress that the real solution is stopping men from committing physical and psychological violence against women. Feminists advocate for a woman's right to walk freely and safely at any time and place. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sabrina Queter. Sabrina Queter was born on December 5, 1982, in a London suburb to parents of French and Algerian descent, giving her a unique cultural heritage. This blend of influences likely contributed to her striking features and fiery personality. As the eldest of 4 children, Sabrina was cherished by her family and often held up as a model for her siblings. At the age of 2, her family moved to Paris, France, where she spent most of her childhood and adolescence. However, during her school years, Sabrina's complex and difficult personality began to emerge. Former classmates have described her as arrogant, domineering, self-absorbed, and extremely selfish. She had few friends, either at school or in her neighborhood, as she believed she was superior to those around her. Sabrina was particularly hostile towards bright and outgoing girls, viewing them as rivals and enemies. Despite her stunning physical appearance, she was a striking brunette with brown eyes and an impressive figure. Sabrina's inability to form genuine connections with others held her back from pursuing a career in modeling, where her looks could have taken her far. Instead, she often sought to manipulate those around her. As a child, Sabrina showed promise in sports and had some interest in music, but her lack of persistence and inconsistent effort hindered her from achieving success in either area. Later, Sabrina alleged that she was mistreated by her maternal relatives in France during her childhood, but these claims were never confirmed. In contrast, her family maintained that they spoiled her and that she always sought attention. During her teenage years, Sabrina's athletic ambitions were prematurely halted by a back injury, which in turn led to her dependence on prescription painkillers. In an attempt to obtain these drugs illegally, she was arrested and received a warning from the police. Sabrina was extremely self-absorbed, constantly craving attention and admiration for her appearance. She firmly believed that her future would be filled with luxury, glamour, and interactions with celebrities, and was even convinced she was born to be a star. At times, her fantasies became so vivid that they distorted her perception of reality, making her believe she belonged in the Hollywood elite. Sabrina holds a degree in English and French literature from the Sorbonne, but since 2006, she has falsely claimed to work in various roles in the fashion industry, such as stylist, makeup artist, fashion designer, or designer, despite lacking actual expertise. Sabrina, known for her stunning looks, has a history of captivating men and exploiting their affection. However, she never considered any of her suitors worthy of a serious relationship, waiting instead for a submissive partner who would obey her every command. After completing her education, Sabrina remained unclear about her life goals, feeling entitled to everything without putting in effort. Nevertheless, she enrolled at the prestigious Sorbonne University and simultaneously worked at a sweet shop to support herself financially. It was there, at the age of 18, that she met Wissam Medouni. Medouni, 6 years her senior, was a manager at a major French company's head office and a graduate of one of Paris's most prestigious universities. He aspired to earn a master's degree to advance his career, Despite not being particularly handsome or part of elite social circles, he fell deeply in love with Sabrina and was willing to fulfill all her desires. Sabrina, in turn, found Muni appealing, seeing him as someone she could manipulate and as a ticket to a wealthy lifestyle. She was drawn to his ambition and capacity for career success, as well as his willingness to pamper and spoil her. The couple began dating in 2000 and moved in together within a few months. Sabrina's true nature was soon exposed as she attempted to control Muni in every way possible. When her demands were not met, she would throw tantrums, manipulate others, and even resort to physical violence. Moreover, she began to openly cheat on Muni, not even trying to hide her infidelity or justify her actions. She would engage in flings with anyone, from casual acquaintances to Muni's closest friends or colleagues. Despite Muni's numerous attempts to end the relationship and leave her, he always found himself returning to her, unable to break free from his deep love for Sabrina. In 2001, Muni achieved his master's degree and a significant promotion, resulting in a substantial increase in income. He spent lavishly on Sabrina's luxurious clothing and entertainment. As his family owned several properties in Paris, he managed them and handed over all the rental income to Sabrina. Muni, who shared Franco-Algerian roots with Sabrina, saw her as a kindred spirit. According to reports, in the fall of 2001, they had a Muslim ceremony, which was documented by a certificate from the Argento Mosque. However, this religious ceremony was not enough to make their union official and legal. The couple had a son, whose paternity Muni officially recognized. Years later, however, a Frenchman named Anthony Francois claimed to be the child's biological father. Francois, who would later testify in Sabrina's trial, described her as volatile, unpredictable, promiscuous, and manipulative. In 2008, the global financial crisis led to Wesley Harris losing his high-paying job when the company he worked for went bankrupt. Around the same time, Sabrina became fixated on moving to London, and she made the decision to relocate without fully consulting Muni. With little choice, Muni followed her to London, where he found work at a major English bank. However, Sabrina struggled to establish herself in the fashion industry due to her lack of skills, experience, and formal education. Over time, she had to lower her expectations and took on various jobs, including working as a nanny, in a call center, at a cafe, and even attempting network marketing. Sabrina's pursuit of love and success took an unexpected turn when she revived her teenage passion for music and added musician and composer to her credentials. Despite her enthusiasm, Sabrina faced challenges finding professional opportunities in the music industry. She attended numerous auditions and social events, hoping to make valuable connections. Sabrina met Walton, a famous musician and songwriter, at an event. Mark was one of the founding members of Boyzone, a well-known Irish boy band. After leaving the group, he became a successful producer and music mogul, working with artists like Jennifer Lopez, Jessica Simpson, and Lady Gaga. By 2016, his net worth had exceeded $1 billion. To Sabrina, Mark was the perfect person to meet, her key to a world of fame and luxury. She impressed Mark with her beauty and charisma, and he fell in love with her at first sight. As their relationship progressed quickly, Sabrina made an effort to be pleasant and endearing, eventually ending her relationship with Muni as she saw a promising future with Mark. Mark's previous relationship and child didn't deter Sabrina, and soon the couple moved in together, living in a luxurious house in an upscale London area. Mark covered all the expenses, including the rent for the lavish house Sabrina had chosen. For several months, Sabrina lived the luxurious life she had always dreamed of, socializing with celebrities, attending elite events, wearing designer clothing, and even appearing in glossy magazines. Sabrina found it difficult to manage Mark because she was afraid of losing him. Her inability to control her nature eventually led to jealousy towards every woman around Mark. Over time, Sabrina's demands grew, and she began to crave more gifts and luxury. Mark tried to please her by showering her with designer clothes, jewelry, and taking her to upscale restaurants and clubs, but no matter what he did, it was never enough to satisfy her. Sabrina's home had a revolving door of staff and nannies due to her growing paranoia. She suspected them of theft or trying to seduce Mark, which led to a high turnover rate. Her irrational behavior pushed Mark to the edge, and in 2011, he ended their relationship and moved to California, leaving Sabrina with nothing. When Mark left, Sabrina lost the luxurious lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. In an attempt to win him back, she started giving interviews accusing Mark of being violent and abusive. She would call him, crying and begging him to return, even threatening to take her own life, but none of these tactics worked. Realizing she had lost Mark, Sabrina reached out to her ex-partner, Muni, whose career was thriving as a bank executive. He forgave her and took her back, still harboring feelings for her. They resumed living together, and soon after reuniting, Sabrina discovered she was pregnant. Sabrina informed Walton, who, through his lawyers, offered to provide for the child and her, offering a monthly allowance. However, Walton requested a paternity test after the child's birth to confirm he was the father. Sabrina's refusal to undergo the test hinted at her uncertainty about the child's paternity, which could have secured her substantial regular payments. Instead of accepting the proposed allowance, Sabrina demanded that Walton double the amount. When Walton refused, she launched a campaign against him. Taking to social media, Sabrina made false accusations that Walton was obsessed with her, extremely jealous of Muni, and had even threatened them physically. She claimed that Walton had broken into their home, assaulted Muni, traumatized their children, and sexually assaulted her in violent ways. However, her allegations were unfounded, as Walton had a solid alibi, having been in the United States since their breakup. After Walton sued her for defamation and the police threatened to take action, Sabrina stopped making accusations against her ex-boyfriend. Sabrina settled in Holden, southwest London, with Muni and their 2 children, and it seemed as though the conflict had been resolved. However, Sabrina, who was not accustomed to managing household chores and found it challenging to care for 2 children, decided to hire a nanny who could also help with the housework. She posted an online job advertisement and conducted personal interviews, but most candidates did not meet her expectations, and those who did not stay long in her household. A young French woman, Sophie Léon, responded to the job advertisement. Because Sophie was in her hometown in France at the time, the interview was conducted via video call. The 19-year-old modestly agreed to all the terms, taking care of a child, helping with household chores, and cooking, in exchange for a symbolic weekly wage of £50, including full board and lodging with her future employer. Born on January 7, 1996, in Troyes, a small town between Oise and Sens, Sophie grew up in a humble family. Her parents, Catherine and Patrick Leon, were ordinary workers struggling to make ends meet. After completing her education, Sophie earned a diploma in childcare, but she didn't want to work in her hometown. Instead, she dreamed of moving to a big city. Known for her kind and open-hearted nature, Sophie was loved by those who knew her. She was shy, quiet, and plain in appearance, and wore glasses due to poor vision, which made her a bit self-conscious. During their conversation, Sabrina identified Sophie, who seemed ordinary and unremarkable, as the perfect person to manipulate. Sophie was keen to gain experience and good references, so she was willing to work for very little money. To Sophie, Sabrina appeared to be a serious and trustworthy employer, which she mentioned to her parents before leaving for London. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly for Sophie Leonette, who innocently believed that working for the Queeters would be a great way to start her nanny career. She quickly formed a close bond with the children, completed her household chores as specified in her contract, and had sufficient time and resources to improve her English language skills and explore the city's attractions. This peaceful period lasted for several months, and all appeared to be going well. Problems arose when Muni lost his job, leaving the family with only one stable source of income. the monthly child support payments from Walton. Sabrina then demanded that Walton increase these payments, but he requested a DNA test to confirm his paternity first. As a result, the family struggled financially, finding it hard to afford their rent and basic necessities. Sabrina, who was unwilling to give up her luxuries and determined to maintain her socialite lifestyle, became increasingly irritable and aggressive, often taking her frustrations out on the young nanny. With their remaining funds, the couple attempted to start a bakery business, but it failed. Sabrina then turned to Walton, asking for a large sum of money to launch her clothing line, but he categorically refused. This led to tears and complaints from Sabrina about poverty. Sabrina frequently vented to Leonette about her ex-lover, and the nanny tried to console her employer. One theory claims Sabrina Cooder masterminded a blackmail plot targeting Walton. She allegedly planned to frame Sophie as Walton's partner in crime and lover, planted in their home to cause chaos and put their children in danger. Sabrina supposedly believed Walton was using Sophie as a tool for revenge, motivated by the nanny's supposed infatuation with him. Cooder allegedly wanted to record Sophie's fabricated confessions and present them to the police as evidence, which would be enough to demand compensation from Walton for his alleged wrongdoing. However, Sophie refused to give false statements on camera. An alternative theory, as argued by Cooder's lawyers in court, suggests that due to her mental health issues, Sabrina genuinely believed in her conspiracy theory, viewing Sophie as an enemy and a threat to her family. According to this version, Sabrina didn't coerce the nanny into giving false testimony. Instead, she sincerely believed Sophie was Walton's accomplice, infiltrating their household to harm them. Sophie's life rapidly deteriorated into a living hell. She was housed in a wealthy home, but it felt like a torture chamber in the basement. At first, her employers piled extra work on her without a pay rise. Soon she was trapped in a relentless routine of chores from dawn till late at night, leaving her no personal time or freedom to leave the house. To make matters worse, her salary was stopped, and her passport was confiscated to prevent her from escaping or returning to France, effectively holding her captive. Her family contact was strictly monitored. The situation only got worse. Sophie was hardly fed and was coerced into making false accusations against Walton, a man she had never met or known. Her communication was limited to screams, insults, and threats, with accusations of theft flying her way. She was warned that she would be imprisoned if she refused to comply with their demands against the musician. Couters used brutal tactics when threats failed. Sophie was confined to a cold basement, given scarce food, and physically abused. She grew weak and emaciated. Slaps and hair-pulling escalated to violent assaults, including a broken nose. The beatings became daily, with new cruelties designed to inflict pain. The London house basement became a torture chamber with no escape. In 2017, Sabrina took Sophie Leon, a malnourished and abused 21-year-old nanny, to a police station to testify against Mark Walton. However, when questioned, Sophie remained silent. The police, instead of helping her, allowed everyone to leave despite her obvious signs of abuse, including weighing under 88 pounds, hair loss, a missing tooth, and a limp. In mid-September 2017, Sophie Leon called her mother, Catherine, in tears, confessing that she wanted to return home but lacked the money to do so. Catherine reassured Sophie that she would buy her a ticket and told her to pack her bags immediately. Sadly, this was the last time Catherine would ever hear her daughter's voice. Just a few days later, on the evening of September 20th, 2017, the authorities were alerted by the Couters' neighbors, who had noticed a fire in the yard. What alarmed them was not the fire itself, but the overpowering, sweetly greasy smell it emitted, which one neighbor likened to the smell of burning flesh and hair, combined with something unidentifiable. The thick smoke lingered, leaving a putrid stench on clothes and skin. When firefighters and police arrived, the homeowners, who seemed strangely calm and oblivious to the reason for the emergency visit, met them after extinguishing the fire. A charred human hand was discovered in the ashes. The couple was promptly arrested, and heavily burned human remains were recovered from the fire. Although the gender and age of the deceased could not be determined initially, the body was eventually identified as Sophie Leonette, recognizable due to the melted metal frame of her distinctive glasses, which were found fused to her skull. The investigation into Sophie Leon's cause of death was highly complex due to the severe fire damage to her body. Despite these challenges, forensic experts discovered evidence of extreme physical abuse, including multiple rib fractures, jaw damage, and blunt force trauma to her skull and limbs, indicating she sustained these injuries while still alive. Further examination revealed missing teeth and severe nose damage, suggesting Sophie endured prolonged and intense beatings, resulting in broken bones and knocked-out teeth. Disturbing video recordings found in the house exposed the sadistic nature of her captors, who tortured and coerced Sophie into confessing to colluding with Walton and intending to harm the children. The videos showed her being beaten with objects such as fists, an iron cord, and a golf club, as well as being subjected to electric shock torture. Additionally, she was humiliated, forced to submerge her head in a toilet until she began to suffocate. Experts believe it is likely that Sophie died from asphyxiation before being burned, sparing her from the agony of being alive during the burning. Sabrina and Wesley Harris denied any wrongdoing and displayed no regret for their heinous act. After killing their nanny, Muni went to a nearby supermarket where he purchased firelighter fluid to burn the body and groceries for his family's dinner, behaving as if nothing untoward had occurred. In March 2018, the court proceedings against the ruthless duo commenced. Sabrina attempted to depict herself as a victim, alleging that Walton's constant harassment had pushed her into a pathological state. However, medical evaluations revealed that although Sabrina suffered from mental health issues, she was not insane and had full awareness of her actions. Wesley, who was physically fit, was psychologically dependent on Sabrina, submitting to her will and obeying her blindly. On June 26, 2018, the court delivered a guilty verdict to the couple, convicting them of torturing, humiliating, and murdering their nanny in exceptionally cruel circumstances. The court handed down life imprisonment sentences with the possibility of parole only after 30 years. Notwithstanding this, both defendants refused to accept responsibility for their actions and instead appealed to reduce their sentences. Sabrina even attempted to fake mental illness to be transferred from prison to a hospital, but this ploy was unsuccessful. Walton, who attended the trial, was overcome with remorse for his ex-partner's brutal actions, which were driven by a warped desire for his attention and financial gain. He offered his heartfelt condolences to the victim's parents and spontaneously pledged a substantial donation to support the grief-stricken family who had lost their beloved daughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michaela Gerecht. On November 19, 1988, Michaela, then 9 years old, and her friend Katrina were busy trying on different outfits for an upcoming school performance at their homes. The joy was palpable as it marked the beginning of the Thanksgiving break. Around 10 a.m., Katrina's dad gave her $5 to buy some candy. The two friends rushed to Michaela's house to ask her mom if they could visit the nearby store, which was less than a mile away. Although they had been to the store many times before, with family or older neighbors, Michaela's mom was hesitant to let them go alone, citing their young age and lack of experience. After some cajoling, Michaela's mom finally agreed, on the condition that they would purchase the candy and head straight back home. As Michaela was her parents' long-awaited first child, a true miracle, her mom was particularly concerned about her safety. Despite her reservations, Michaela's mom believed that nothing bad would happen, given the store's proximity and their plan to ride their scooters there. Michaela raced back to Katrina's house. They planned to use 2 scooters, so Katrina took hers and borrowed another one from her brother. They went to the store, parked their scooters nearby, and went inside to make their purchases. When they came out, they got engrossed in conversation and completely forgot about their scooters. They started walking home but quickly realized their mistake and returned to where they had left the scooters. That's when they noticed Michaela's scooter was missing. Assuming someone had moved it, they decided to search the store area from different angles. Michaela scanned the parking lot and soon spotted her scooter next to a car parked a short distance from the store. As she approached it, Katrina suddenly heard a terrifying scream. She ran back and saw a man grabbing Michaela and forcing her into the car beside her scooter. The man promptly got back in the driver's seat and sped off. Shaken, Katrina rushed into the store and alerted the cashier about the incident. The cashier immediately called the police, who arrived at the scene within minutes. The store employee also contacted Michaela's father, as they were acquainted, and informed him of the situation. Michaela's father, accompanied by Katrina's father, hurried to the store where investigators had already gathered. He instructed his wife to remain at home by the phone, awaiting a possible call from the police. The detectives faced a multitude of challenges from the outset. The lack of surveillance cameras near the store and the sole witness, Katrina, who was in a state of deep shock and barely able to speak, hindered their progress. Her father was permitted to take her home, leaving the store cashier as the initial lead. She recounted a suspicious individual loitering around the store shortly before the abduction. He had parked his car, exited, but never entered the store, instead opting to walk along the building, peering through windows and seemingly watching them. The cashier had a gut feeling that he might be planning to rob her. Based on her description, the man was white, approximately 30 years old, and sported a prominent mustache. He arrived in an old maroon-colored sedan, but the model and license plate number remained unclear. After gathering the suspect's description, the police created a composite sketch and disseminated it to the media. News of the abduction spread rapidly throughout the city and beyond, leaving the public shocked that such a brazen act could occur in a busy area. The police also shared the sketch and a description of the suspect's car with hundreds of patrol officers across the county. Officers began stopping vehicles matching the description, hoping to find her alive. Meanwhile, the detectives turned over Maya's scooter to forensic experts for analysis. They suspected that the kidnapper had witnessed Maya and Katrina's arrival at the store and strategically positioned one of the scooters near the back door of his car to facilitate the abduction. This led them to believe that his fingerprints might be on the scooter, and indeed they discovered a fingerprint that didn't match anyone in Katrina's family or the 9-year-old girl. However, there was a hitch. The fingerprint was incomplete, making it challenging to conduct a database search at the time, as the technology wasn't sophisticated enough for such procedures. As a result, the police had to rely on direct comparisons with potential suspects. By the evening of the abduction, the FBI had joined the investigation, prompted by a surge in child disappearances not only in Hayward but also in surrounding cities. They suspected a link between Michaela's case and these other vanishings. Despite the FBI's involvement and widespread media attention, little progress was made in locating the missing girl. Michaela's parents were understandably heartbroken, and her mother was consumed by guilt, replaying the events leading up to the abduction. In particular, she recalled an unsettling incident just a week prior where Michaela had risen unusually early, sat at the kitchen table, and claimed to be writing a poem. This was peculiar, given her daughter's usual sleep patterns, and the poem's theme, people being abducted and hidden in attics but not killed, seemed eerily prescient. At the time, her mother had found it strange for a 9-year-old to conceive such ideas, but in hindsight, it took on an uncanny, almost prophetic quality, leaving her to wonder if Michaela had unwittingly foreseen her own fate. In the 2 days following the abduction, the police launched an exhaustive search for the suspect and the missing girl, but despite their best efforts, they failed to make any progress. In a bid to gather more information, they decided to re-interview Katrina, hoping that time might have jogged her memory. However, this decision led to a perplexing twist. The girl who witnessed the abduction and the cashier provided contradictory descriptions of the kidnapper's appearance. Katrina described the man as around 20 years old, with long, unkempt, light-colored hair that reached his shoulders and a face covered in pimples. She also remembered his piercing blue eyes, reminiscent of a fox's. Furthermore, she recalled some details about the car, a beige sedan with a boxy shape and numerous dents. In contrast, the cashier's suspicion had been sparked by a man near the store whose description was vastly different from Katrina's. This discrepancy presented a significant challenge for the investigators, who had already circulated an inaccurate composite sketch of the suspect through the media, and to patrol officers, leading the search for an entirely different individual. This unfolding drama took place within the critical first 48 hours following the abduction, the most crucial period for a swift resolution. Based on her description, they promptly created a new composite sketch and redistributed it. Additionally, the police decided to interview all men in the area with prior convictions for sexual offenses. Numerous volunteers also joined the efforts, going door to door to interview residents in the hopes of someone recognizing the abductor or providing any other relevant information. They posted thousands of flyers featuring her photo and a description of the incident. And in just the initial few days, a staggering 42,000 of these flyers were distributed. After several days, they received their first promising lead. 3 individuals contacted them, reporting a hiking trip in a vast national park near their city. During their excursion, the hikers stumbled upon footprints on the ground, distinguishing one set belonging to an adult and another to a child. They decided to follow these tracks, eventually coming across a blanket and empty fast food wrappers deep in the forest. The police considered the possibility that these tracks might be connected to Maya and her abductor. The FBI's psychological profile also suggested that the abductor would likely take his victim to a secluded location, far removed from civilization. Given the park's size and its proximity to the city, it seemed to align perfectly with this theory. Detectives decided to conduct a thorough search of the park, utilizing all available resources. They scoured the ground, while helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scanned the area from above. However, all their efforts yielded nothing, as they couldn't find her or any incriminating evidence. The police extended their search to other parks, mountains, and remote areas, but all leads proved futile. Meanwhile, the case's nationwide media coverage sparked a deluge of tips, with over 4,000 received within the first month alone. Investigators faced the daunting task of pursuing each lead, a challenge that proved overwhelming. The case was a hot topic of discussion among San Francisco's neighboring residents and nearby cities, with prominent figures even making public appeals for information. As the search continued, a substantial $70,000 reward was offered, and Michaela's photograph was plastered on millions of milk cartons across the state. Despite the massive community effort and numerous leads, detectives made little headway. By December's end, a month and a half into the investigation, the police had only managed to exhaust thousands of leads, with no progress made in the following months. Still, the police, along with Michaela's mother, who had launched her own investigation, studying similar cases and searching for possible suspects, persisted in their efforts, holding on to the hope that Michaela was still alive, being held captive by her abductor. In 1991, detectives focused on 43-year-old Timothy Binder, and the deeper they dug into his background, the more disturbing it became. Before Michaela's abduction, Binder was already under police suspicion due to his odd behavior. He had been sending gifts, letters, and money to several young girls, with some of these letters featuring highlighted Bible passages that included phrases like, "I have chosen you," and "be with me." Parents of some of these girls grew concerned and reported him to the police, which led to an interrogation of Binder. He claimed he was simply trying to befriend these girls, thinking they were lonely. However, the investigation uncovered a worrying history. In 1985, Binder was fired from his job in Child Protective Services in Colorado for collecting personal information about young girls and then sending them gifts and letters. A search of his van revealed many photographs of children and Bible passages decorating the interior. Additionally, Binder had previously been arrested for trying to lure 2 girls into his van, although no charges were filed. Furthermore, he regularly visited local cemeteries, spending an unusual amount of time at the graves of young girls. 6 months before Michaela was abducted, a 7-year-old girl named Amber vanished in the same area. Binder got in touch with Amber's mother, offering to help and frequently visiting her home. He even sent a letter to the police, predicting that the next girl to go missing would be 9 years old. Months later, Michaela, who was also 9, was abducted. After she disappeared, Binder contacted her mother repeatedly, visited her home, and offered his assistance. But the disturbing pattern continued. In early December 1988, Binder sent a Christmas card to an FBI profiler he had spoken to before, and the card showed a girl holding up 4 fingers. Shortly after, a 4-year-old girl went missing in the same town. Despite these disturbing circumstances, which comprised circumstantial evidence, detectives secured a search warrant for Binder's home, where he resided with his wife. Unfortunately, their search yielded no concrete leads linking him to the abductions. When news of Binder's peculiar behavior hit the newspapers, the public began to suspect he might be a serial killer, resulting in harassment and attacks on him and his family. He subsequently sued the city authorities for disseminating misinformation and emerged victorious. Detectives persisted in investigating Binder for several months, but ultimately concluded that there was no concrete evidence implicating him in these crimes. Some detectives believe that he posed no threat to children, and his unusual behavior might have been unrelated to these cases. Consequently, the police shifted their focus towards alternative suspects. A new substantial lead did not emerge until December 1992, 4 years after Michaela's disappearance. An inmate from Indiana, serving time for robbery, contacted the police, claiming to know the identity of her abductor. He stated that he had helped bury her body in the same park where traces of evidence had been discovered. Initially, investigators showed little interest in this tip, but when the inmate wrote a letter to a prominent San Francisco newspaper, the police faced harsh criticism, and under public pressure, they reluctantly decided to interview him. He promised not only to pinpoint Michaela's exact burial site, but also to lead them directly to the killer. The inmate was transferred to California, where he collaborated with the police on a search mission. He claimed that the body was buried in a gladiolus field, and the officers devoted all their resources to scouring that area. The search lasted 8 hours, until the inmate unexpectedly confessed that he had fabricated the entire story. He explained that his intention was to bring some comfort to Michaela's family and help them find closure. However, Michaela's relatives and the police were outraged by his false statement. As a consequence, the inmate received an additional 6.5-year prison sentence, nearly doubling his original sentence, and was ordered to pay Michaela's family $6,000 in compensation. In August 2000, a new lead emerged in the case with the arrest of Curtis Anderson, suspected of murdering a 7-year-old girl in Valo a year earlier. He confessed to the crime and was imprisoned. However, detectives harbored suspicions that he might be responsible for similar crimes. For 7 years, no concrete evidence supported this theory until Curtis reached out to the FBI. Weakened by poor health, he wanted to confess to additional crimes before his demise. His confession revealed that he had killed 13 more girls and women, including 7-year-old Amber, who vanished 6 months before Michaela. Curtis provided specific details that made investigators take his involvement seriously. Nonetheless, proving his guilt remained a daunting task, as there was no physical evidence and the victims' bodies remained unfound. Regarding Michaela's case, Curtis denied any involvement, despite his car's striking resemblance to Katrina's description. Although FBI agents planned to continue questioning him, Curtis passed away in 2012, halting the investigation. A new lead emerged when an inmate contacted the police, suggesting that his associate Lauren Herzog bore a remarkable likeness to the composite sketch of the suspect. Detectives were intrigued, given Lauren and his partner's conviction for multiple murders they committed together. Although suspected of killing 19 people, investigators could only prove some of these crimes. Notably, Lauren had taken his own life in prison a month before the inmate came forward. Undeterred, the police investigated Lauren's potential involvement. A younger photo of Lauren did resemble the composite sketch, but detectives required more concrete evidence. They proceeded to excavate a well where Lauren and his partner had disposed of their victims' bodies. The excavation yielded thousands of bone fragments, which medical experts meticulously examined. After extensive analysis, it was determined that the bones belonged to 5 different girls, but none matched Michaela's DNA. Despite excavating multiple wells, the police were unable to find any evidence linking Lauren to the case. In 2018, a significant breakthrough emerged in the case. David Mitch, a man already imprisoned for killing his 39-year-old girlfriend in 1989, was charged with the murders of 2 women in 1986 near Michaela's town. The key to this development was modern DNA analysis, which enabled investigators to link David to these crimes by analyzing biological material found under the victim's nails, something that was impossible back then. Detectives decided to investigate his possible involvement in Michaela's case and found several intriguing connections. They discovered that David was in the same area when Michaela was abducted, matching Katrina's description and driving a similar car. Since David's fingerprints were already on record, experts re-examined the partial fingerprint found on Michaela's scooter. Thanks to modern technology, they made a significant breakthrough. The fingerprint on the scooter perfectly matched David's. By 2020, the hope of Michaela being alive had faded, and David was charged with her murder. He denied his involvement, and the case went to trial in early 2023. Preliminary hearings took place, and the judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence to proceed with the trial. David's lawyer attempted to challenge the evidence, claiming that the scooter's fingerprint didn't necessarily link his client to the crime. However, given the circumstances, this argument seemed dubious, as it was apparent that the abductor had deliberately left the scooter near the car's back door to ambush her when she approached. The defense also tried to contest the murder charges, as Michaela's body was never found, implying a lack of proof of her death. However, this argument held little weight, as numerous modern cases have resulted in convictions without the recovery of the victim's body, given the substantial evidence. Furthermore, David had a history of violent crimes throughout his life. Michaela's father traveled from out of state to attend the press conference announcing the arrest of his daughter's kidnapper. Unfortunately, Michaela's mother, who had held on to hope of finding her daughter alive all these years, was unable to attend as she battled cancer. Shortly after the news of the arrest, she passed away, thanking the investigators for uncovering the truth before her life's end. The police pledged to continue searching for Michaela's remains, offering a $10,000 reward for any valuable information that could lead to her discovery. David's trial is about to start and will cover 3 separate cases: the murder of Michaela and 2 other cases where his DNA was found under the victim's fingernails. Initially, the prosecution pushed for the death penalty, but when the district attorney changed, the new one decided not to pursue it. If David is found guilty of all 3 murders, he will not receive a life sentence, but rather a prison sentence of several decades. This decision has outraged the victims, families, and garnered significant media attention, with David's lawyer being the only one to support this change. However, considering David is already 62 years old, it's unlikely he will live to see the end of even this reduced sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Elizabeth Smart. On June 5, 2002, 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart was asleep in her bedroom in the affluent town of Federal Heights, Salt Lake City, Utah, sharing the room with her sister Mary Catherine. As the night wore on, their peaceful slumber was shattered. A soft-spoken man, armed with a knife, forced open a window in the girls' room, disturbing Mary Catherine, who pretended to be asleep in an attempt to protect her sister. The intruder then turned to Elizabeth, ordering her to remain silent, threatening to harm her if she didn't comply. Fearing for her life, Elizabeth obeyed, putting on shoes before being taken outside the house. Meanwhile, Mary Catherine lay still for 2 hours, waiting for the perfect moment to alert her parents, Ed and Lois Smart. When she finally woke them up, she told them that someone had taken Elizabeth, but her parents were initially skeptical, thinking their daughter might have been dreaming. However, as the events began to unfold, they took Mary Catherine's story seriously. After inspecting Elizabeth and Mary Catherine's bedroom, Ed and Lois found a cut window screen, which corroborated Mary Catherine's story. Concerned for Elizabeth's safety, Ed and Lois promptly notified the authorities. The police arrived at the Smart family home and questioned Mary Catherine about the man who had abducted Elizabeth from their bedroom. Mary Catherine described the abductor as having dark hair and dark hair on his arms and the backs of his hands. Although the man had spoken quietly to Elizabeth during the incident, Mary Catherine could still identify his voice as somehow familiar, even though she couldn't recall any specific occasion when she had heard it before. About 3.5 hours after Elizabeth was taken, the authorities used the Rachel Alert system to broadcast information about her abduction to the public. The Rachel Alert, named after a Utah girl who was abducted and murdered, enabled the authorities to rapidly disseminate information to a wide audience and enlist the public's help in locating Elizabeth. The police investigated people who had toured the Smart family's home, which was up for sale, as potential suspects in Elizabeth's abduction since she had been taken from her bedroom on June 5, 2002. Additionally, they searched the family's computer, seeking any online interactions Elizabeth may have had with strangers, as this was a common tactic used in child abduction cases. The day after Elizabeth's kidnapping, her devastated parents, Ed and Lois, made a heartfelt and emotional appeal on national television, pleading for her safe return. Ed addressed the perpetrator directly, his voice filled with desperation and love, asking them to bring their daughter home. With tears in his eyes, he begged the person responsible to have mercy and return Elizabeth safely, expressing his immense love for his daughter and his unwavering commitment to finding her. In Federal Heights, the police interviewed Elizabeth's neighbors, but none of them reported seeing or hearing anything unusual on the day she was abducted. The lack of information was surprising to the police, who had hoped to gather more leads to aid the investigation. Following Elizabeth's abduction, Rocky Anderson, the mayor of Salt Lake City, made a public announcement offering an initial reward of $10,000 for her safe return to her family. This amount was later increased to $250,000. A massive search effort was launched, with nearly 12,200 volunteers joining Elizabeth's family and friends to look for her. However, at a news conference, the police admitted that despite receiving thousands of tips, their progress in the case was limited. The authorities in Salt Lake City solicited assistance from other police departments statewide, but lacked crucial evidence, such as a vehicle description, to pursue significant leads. As a result, the investigation into Elizabeth's disappearance stagnated, causing frustration among law enforcement officials. Captain Scott Atkinson of the Salt Lake City Police Department publicly stated that all individuals were still suspects in Elizabeth's abduction, while reaffirming that her family was not the primary focus of the investigation. A volunteer searching for Elizabeth reported a suspicious man to the police after spotting him in a wooded canyon. The volunteer described the man's suspicious behavior, prompting the police to launch an overnight search. Despite their efforts, they couldn't find the man and eventually dismissed the tip as not credible. The police also received a tip from a local milkman in Federal Heights. He claimed to have seen a man driving an older gray Honda or Nissan on Elizabeth Street a day or two before her disappearance. The milkman said he felt uneasy about the driver and wrote down the license plate number. However, when the police checked their database for the license plate number, they couldn't find any relevant information or leads, so they dismissed the tip as not viable. The police officers investigating Elizabeth Smart's abduction faced a significant challenge due to the large number of people who gathered at the Smart residence in the hours immediately following her abduction. When the police arrived at the scene around 4 a.m., they found the home already crowded with people, which compromised the integrity of any potential evidence. As the search for Elizabeth Smart continued, the police questioned a man who had interacted with her at a social event prior to her abduction. However, they soon cleared him of any suspicion and determined he had no involvement in her disappearance. The search efforts intensified, with over 20 volunteer pilots flying their private planes over the Salt Lake area, but unfortunately, these efforts yielded no results. Tracking dogs picked up a scent in Red Boot Canyon, several miles from Elizabeth's home, but police searched the area and found nothing. The search for Elizabeth had taken a toll on her father, Ed Smart, who was on the verge of exhaustion. He collapsed from the strain and was taken to the hospital, but was released a few hours later and continued searching for his daughter. Ed and his wife, Lois, were utterly exhausted, unable to sleep, and barely holding on. In a media interview, Ed expressed his frustration and determination to find Elizabeth, stating that they were holding on to hope that their daughter was alive and would soon return home to them. Despite their exhaustion, Ed and Lois Smart remained hopeful that Elizabeth would come back to them. Elizabeth's mother, Lois Smart, publicly declared her love and devotion to her daughter through a heartfelt statement to the media, saying, "Elizabeth, if you can hear us, we love you." Her loved ones gathered for a candlelight vigil, praying for her safe return home. Following Elizabeth's abduction, the police asked her father, Ed, to take a polygraph test, which he willingly agreed to, demonstrating his family's cooperation in aiding the authorities to locate their daughter. The investigation subsequently ruled out the possibility that Elizabeth had staged her own disappearance and confirmed that she did not run away. Police got a tip about Brett Michael Edmonds, who was sighted in Federal Heights around Elizabeth's abduction time. They looked for him, but couldn't find him. He'd moved to New Mexico and Texas. After a chase, they caught a guy who looked like him, but it wasn't him. The police eventually located Brett Michael Edmonds in West Virginia, where he had been hospitalized due to an overdose and liver failure. Although his health was critical, and there were fears he might not survive, his condition stabilized enough to allow authorities to question him about Elizabeth's abduction. In a fortunate turn of events, Brett was conscious, alert, and able to speak, enabling the police and FBI agents to interview him. During the interview, Brett fully cooperated with the authorities, who ultimately concluded that he was not involved in Elizabeth's abduction. After Brett Michael Edmonds was cleared as a suspect in Elizabeth's abduction, police turned their attention to 48-year-old Richard Albert Ritchie. Elizabeth's father, Ed Smart, informed police that he had employed Richard at his home for 2 months the previous year. Ed said that since Richard didn't own a vehicle, they made a deal. Ed would give Richard his 1990 Jeep Cherokee in exchange for his labor. However, Ed was unaware that Richard Ritchie was a career criminal, and he later stated that if he had known about Richard's background, he wouldn't have hired him. Richard Ritchie's criminal history dates back to 1973, when he was convicted of second-degree felony burglary, marking the start of a string of offenses over several decades. In 1981, he was convicted of burglary for a separate incident. His most serious crime occurred in 1983 when he was sent to prison for aggravated robbery and attempted murder after wounding a police officer during a gunfire exchange with authorities during a drugstore robbery. Additionally, Richard Ritchie was convicted of theft in 1996 for stealing approximately $2,500 worth of food from a food pantry in Richfield. Corrections records show that Richard Ritchie was paroled in September 2000. In a media interview, Ed Smart expressed doubts about Richard Ritchie's involvement in his daughter Elizabeth's abduction. Despite Ritchie's criminal history, Ed initially thought him a capable worker. On June 14, 2002, Richard Ritchie was arrested for a parole violation. The police could not confirm his whereabouts on the day Elizabeth was abducted. Richard Ritchie denied any involvement through his attorney and stated that the police had thoroughly searched his home, including digging up his garden. Despite this, no evidence related to Elizabeth's abduction was found. Ritchie claimed he fully cooperated with the police, providing blood samples for DNA comparison and sitting through 26 hours of interviews. He also handed over his vehicle for investigation. By July 2002, Elizabeth Smart had been missing for a month, and her family was desperate for her return. When police received a report of a girl matching Elizabeth's description in Nebraska under suspicious circumstances, they thought their prayers had been answered. A gas station witness reported seeing a crying girl, aged 12 to 14, who seemed to be held against her will in a minivan. The witness provided a detailed description that matched Elizabeth's appearance. This news sent shockwaves through the Smart family, who eagerly hoped for any lead that might help find their missing daughter. However, a thorough police investigation revealed that the report was unrelated to Elizabeth's abduction. Despite a thorough search, police found no evidence linking the sighting to Elizabeth's case. This disappointment left the Smart family struggling with mixed emotions as they continued to hope for Elizabeth's safe return while acknowledging the possibility of false leads. Undeterred, the Smart family remained determined to find Elizabeth, maintaining a cautious optimism. They refused to rule out the possibility that the girl at the gas station was Elizabeth, but stated that they needed to keep an open mind. The family spokesperson clarified that while they weren't necessarily holding out hope that it was Elizabeth, they would be overjoyed if it were. Richard Ritchie, the main suspect in Elizabeth's disappearance, was charged with theft and burglary in two separate incidents. One incident occurred on April 4, 2001, when he allegedly stole items from a house in the Federal Heights neighborhood, which is a second-degree felony and a Class A misdemeanor. The other incident happened on June 6, 2001, when he allegedly stole jewelry and a perfume bottle valued at approximately $3,500 from the Smart family home, which is a third-degree felony. Ritchie pleaded not guilty to these charges. The stolen items were not related to Elizabeth's kidnapping investigation. Salt Lake District Attorney David Yoakum announced the charges at a press conference, stating that Ritchie had denied the theft allegations and was subsequently fired from his job. In August 2002, the police investigation into Elizabeth Smart's abduction hit a major roadblock when Richard Ritchie, their best lead, died from a severe brainstem injury that caused bleeding. Ritchie's condition worsened rapidly, leaving him unable to communicate or breathe on his own. His family made the painful decision to take him off life support in a last-ditch effort to save his life. Although doctors operated to remove a blood clot from his brain and relieve pressure on his brainstem, the damage was too extensive and their efforts were in vain. Despite this setback, the authorities persisted in their search for Elizabeth Smart's abductor. However, Ritchie's death posed a significant obstacle to the investigation, undermining confidence in other leads and hindering progress in the case. In August 2002, a horrific crime was committed when an 11-year-old girl was taken from her bedroom and subjected to sexual assault and brutal beating. The severity of her injuries was appalling, with every bone in the middle of her face broken as revealed by hospital doctors. She required surgery, but sadly, her condition remained critical after the attack. The police investigation led to the arrest of Javier Sickler, a close friend of the girl's father, who was charged with aggravated burglary, aggravated assault, and attempted murder. Javier Sickler claimed that he remembered knocking on the front door of the victim's home, but alleged that he lost consciousness afterward. Despite initial similarities with the Elizabeth Smart abduction case, the police established that Javier Sickler was not involved in her kidnapping. As the search for Elizabeth Smart dragged on, the police began to explore unconventional approaches. They consulted psychics, individuals claiming to possess extrasensory perception that could uncover clues about her location. One tip from these psychics suggested that Elizabeth might be buried in a crypt in the foothills above Salt Lake City. This prompted a Seattle-based company to step forward, claiming that over a dozen of its members had pinpointed Elizabeth's body using a technique called technical remote viewing. According to these individuals, their psychic powers had revealed that Elizabeth was killed within hours of her abduction. However, when the police investigated the alleged tomb, they found no evidence of Elizabeth's whereabouts. In November 2002, Walter Kenneth Holloway was arrested after claiming to be the kidnapper of Elizabeth Smart and demanding a $3 million ransom from her parents, Ed and Lois Smart. Holloway contacted the Smart family and the Salt Lake Police Department, threatening to harm Elizabeth if he didn't receive the money. However, the police tracked him down to South Carolina and found no evidence linking him to her abduction. Ed Smart was outraged by the extortion scheme, which he felt diverted police attention away from finding his daughter and wasted resources that could have been used to locate her. In October 2002, Elizabeth's sister Mary Catherine had a sudden realization. The voice of the abductor was identical to that of Emmanuel, an unemployed man the family had briefly hired to work on their roof and rake leaves in their yard. Although the police were initially skeptical, due to the short duration of Emmanuel's employment with the family, the long delay between the abduction and Mary Catherine's revelation, and her limited exposure to the abductor's voice, the family decided to have a sketch artist draw Emmanuel's likeness based on their descriptions. The resulting sketch was finally released in February 2003 and received widespread media attention, featuring on prominent television shows such as Larry King Live and America's Most Wanted. Relatives of a man named Brian David Mitchell identified a suspect drawing released by the police. They provided contemporary photographs of him, which helped authorities verify that the sketch was an accurate likeness. On March 12, 2003, two couples in Sandy, Utah, recognized Brian David Mitchell walking with a woman and a girl who they knew from the news as the missing girl's abductor. The woman accompanying Mitchell was later identified as his wife, Wanda Berry. The couples quickly called the police, and officers were sent to the location. After questioning, the missing girl from Salt Lake City, Elizabeth Smart, was confirmed to be present. The officers then rescued her and arrested both Mitchell and Berry. Elizabeth provided a shocking account of being abducted, abused, and held captive. Brian David Mitchell had taken her from her home to an encampment outside Salt Lake City. The camp was a makeshift shelter hidden by dense foliage for camouflage. There, she met Wanda Barzy, Mitchell's wife, who played a significant role in her captivity. At first, Wanda Barzy acted like a caring mother figure, offering Elizabeth comfort and warmth. However, as the weeks passed, Barzy's behavior changed dramatically. She began controlling Elizabeth, forcing her to follow their strange religious beliefs. Barzy demanded that Elizabeth pray, read scriptures, and take part in religious rituals. Elizabeth faced a highly traumatic experience during her captivity when she was forced to marry Brian David Mitchell against her will. Wanda Barzy threatened her with physical harm if she refused to comply with their demands. The wedding ceremony, which Mitchell pretended was a symbol of eternal love, was actually a sham with no legal validity, serving only to reinforce Brian David Mitchell's control over Elizabeth. After forcing Elizabeth into marriage, Brian David Mitchell began assaulting her. He claimed he was a Davidic king, tasked by a higher power to kidnap virgins to fight the Antichrist, as a justification for his actions. During her captivity, Elizabeth suffered unimaginable abuse, including being chained to a tree with a metal cable that severely restricted her movement and prevented her from escaping. In addition to physical restraint, Elizabeth was also subjected to psychological manipulation. She was forced to take the new name Esther, inspired by the biblical figure, which symbolized the loss of her identity and the control exerted over her by Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee. Elizabeth was repeatedly sexually assaulted by Brian David Mitchell, leaving her traumatized and fearful. She was also forced to look at explicit magazines, further worsening her trauma and degradation. Throughout her ordeal, Elizabeth was constantly threatened with violence and even death, leaving her in a perpetual state of fear and anxiety. To weaken Elizabeth's resistance, Mitchell frequently forced her to consume alcohol and take drugs, exploiting these substances to break down her defenses and make her more susceptible to his control. The constant intoxication left her disoriented, vulnerable, and disconnected from reality, making it easier for her captors to commit their atrocities. Moreover, Elizabeth was subjected to starvation and fed scraps by her captors. After her rescue, Elizabeth described Wanda Barzee as the most evil woman she had ever encountered. Following years of legal proceedings, Wanda Barzee pleaded guilty to all charges related to Elizabeth's abduction and was sentenced to concurrent 15-year terms in state and federal prison in 2016. Her federal imprisonment was eventually terminated, and she was transferred from the Federal Medical Center Carswell in Fort Worth, Texas, to the Utah State Prison in Draper, Utah, to begin serving her state prison sentence. Elizabeth Smart spoke out against the release of Wanda Barzee in September 2018, despite which Barzee was still set free. At the time, Smart, an advocate for child safety, expressed concern that Barzee still posed a threat to others, citing her lack of remorse and signs of rehabilitation. The controversy surrounding Barzee's release drew media attention and highlighted ongoing concerns about the parole of convicted criminals. After years of legal battles, Brian David Mitchell was sentenced to life imprisonment for kidnapping Elizabeth Smart. During the hearing, Elizabeth addressed her kidnapper directly, delivering a powerful and emotional statement. She described the pain and trauma he had inflicted, telling him that the 9 months in captivity had taken an irreplaceable part of her life. Despite this, Elizabeth showed remarkable resilience and determination, vowing to lead a good life despite the darkness he had brought into her life. Her words reflected her strength and determination to overcome her challenges. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Hannah Potts. Hannah Potts, a 23-year-old woman, vanished, prompting a high-profile FBI investigation that garnered widespread media attention. The mysterious disappearance sent shockwaves through the community, leaving Hannah's family stunned and unsure of who would ultimately be charged. Hannah lived with her large family on a small farm in Gibson County, Indiana, an area dominated by agriculture. Her parents believed their farm was a safe and idyllic place to raise their children. On the night of July 23-24, 2020, Hannah struggled to sleep. She confided in her mother that she was going to take a walk around the farm, check on the animals, and possibly capture some photos. With her phone and camera in hand, she exited the house and headed towards the barn. The next morning, Hannah's family awoke to find her missing, only to be met with a distressing video posted on her Facebook page. In the video, Hannah desperately appealed to her mother for help, claiming that an unknown individual had grabbed her and was holding her captive in a room with 4 walls and minimal lighting. The FBI got involved, and the video rapidly spread on social media. The massive media and social media coverage helped attract a large number of volunteers who, together with the Potts family, handed out thousands of flyers about Hannah's disappearance. Hannah's twin sister Lauren posted on social media, calling for help and asking anyone with information to contact the Princeton, Indiana Police Department. When the FBI attempted to track Hannah's cell phone, they discovered that a cell tower near the Potts family home, about a couple of miles away, had received a signal from her phone on the day of her abduction. This indicated that Hannah was being held captive in a room close to her family's home. Police were searching for a man in a maroon car in connection with Hannah's disappearance, but they couldn't find anyone matching that description within a 5-mile radius of the Potts family home. However, during the investigation, detectives discovered that Hannah had been in close contact with 34-year-old Maria Hopper, who lived just a mile from the Potts' home before she vanished. When investigators questioned Maria, she admitted knowing Hannah, but claimed she had last seen her a few days before the abduction. Although this seemed like another dead end, new evidence came to light when police received a report from a cell phone carrier and gained access to Hannah's social media page, where she had posted a heartbreaking plea. This revealed that Maria had lied about seeing Hannah a few days before the abduction. Hannah disappeared in the early morning hours of July 24th. 2 days later, on the morning of July 26th, several police officers visited Maria Hopper's home. Maria again denied knowing anything about Hannah's whereabouts. Her boyfriend, 45-year-old Joshua Thomas, was also present and claimed he didn't know Hannah at all. When officers asked to search the house, Maria reluctantly gave her consent, but immediately stated that Hannah was not hiding in her house. The police didn't find anything suspicious inside the house, except for the stairs in the kitchen that led to the basement. Maria claimed that the basement only contained unnecessary items, but the law officials wanted to see it for themselves. As they searched through the dusty items in the basement, the police noticed a sheet of plywood that stood out from everything else. It was dust-free and seemed newer than the other items. The plywood appeared to be blocking access to another part of the basement. As one of the officers started to move it, Maria Hopper made a significant announcement. The recording Hannah made when it was shared on social media. Many people immediately found her behavior in the video strange and illogical. For instance, she recorded a 6-minute video which raised questions about why she didn't call 911 instead of wasting time recording. Moreover, it's unclear why the alleged kidnapper didn't search her and take away her phone. What was the purpose of taking pictures at the farm at 2 a.m. while recording the message? Initially, Hannah claimed she was kidnapped by a single man, but later in the video, she refers to they, implying multiple kidnappers. Although she had internet access at the location where she was being held, allowing her to potentially share her location, she failed to do so. The authorities were aware of the unusual circumstances surrounding Hannah's disappearance, but they couldn't jump to conclusions because people react differently under stress. So, the investigation continued, with her disappearance being treated as a potential kidnapping until proven otherwise. The truth finally came to light when the police gained access to Hannah and Maria Hopper's private messages. When an officer inspected Maria's house, he noticed a suspicious sheet of plywood in the basement. Maria confessed that Hannah was hiding behind it. The officer instructed her to come forward, and when Hannah emerged, he saw that she was wearing fully functional handcuffs on her right wrist and shackles on her ankles. Hannah immediately admitted to the police that she had not been kidnapped and was in the basement voluntarily. Further investigation revealed that Hannah had orchestrated her own kidnapping with the help of Maria Hopper and Joshua Thomas. Their social media correspondence told a fantastical story, according to the police arrest records, with messages that read like a work of fiction. Hannah, Maria, and Joshua were taken to the police station for questioning about Hannah's reported kidnapping. The main puzzle was why Hannah would stage her own kidnapping. Hannah explained to the investigators that she was writing a book and wanted to experience the feelings of a kidnapped person to gain inspiration. To make her story more realistic, Maria and Joshua, characters in her book, helped her stage the kidnapping. They kept her captive in their basement, provided her with food and drinks, and destroyed her cell phone to prevent the police from tracing it. The distressing video Hannah posted on Facebook was pre-recorded and rehearsed for about a week before posting. None of her family members were aware of her plan. After the truth came out, the Potts family apologized to those who had participated in the search and were worried about Hannah. Hannah's sister, Brittany, wrote a public apology on social media, expressing her outrage and hurt over Hannah's actions, particularly the fact that she had tried to pin the blame on a person of color. Brittany disowned Hannah and hoped she would face the full force of the law for causing such suffering to their family and others. Hannah Potts wrote in her personal journal, kept in a friend's basement, that she knew her social media post would go viral. However, the post led to her being charged with falsely reporting a kidnapping. The prosecutor argued that Potts' actions were criminal because they caused unnecessary fear about her safety among her family and community. Moreover, her false description of the supposed abductor put innocent people in harm's way. The prosecutor also stressed that the significant time and resources wasted by multiple law enforcement agencies during a period of limited resources could not be recovered. Maria Hopper and Joshua Thomas faced charges for perjury and covering up the hoax. Maria confessed to picking up Potts from her house and lying about hiding her. Thomas admitted to knowing about the fake kidnapping and hiding Hannah in their home. In September 2020, Hannah Potts admitted to fabricating a kidnapping story and was sentenced to a year's probation and 120 hours of community service. Joshua Thomas and Maria Hopper also received probation sentences. It is widely believed that Hannah's motives went beyond seeking inspiration for her book. She also aimed to generate buzz around herself, creating a platform to boost her book's sales.